The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club, and today we're reading from Arundhati Roy's brilliant book, Capitalism, A Ghost Story. This is from the afterword, at the very end of the book. Yesterday morning, the police cleared Zuccotti Park, but today the people are back. The police should know that this protest is not a battle for territory. We're not fighting for the right to occupy a park here or there. We're fighting for justice. Justice is not just for the people of the United States, but for everybody. What you've achieved since September 17th, when the Occupy movement began in the United States, is to introduce a new imagination, a new political language into the heart of the empire. You've reintroduced the right to dream into a system that tried to turn everybody into zombies, mesmerized into equating mindless consumerism with happiness and fulfillment. As a writer, let me tell you, this is an immense achievement. I cannot thank you enough. We are talking about justice. Today, as we speak, the Army of the United States is waging a war of occupation in Iraq and Afghanistan. U.S. drones are killing civilians in Pakistan and beyond. Tens of thousands of U.S. troops and death squads are moving into Africa. If spending trillions of dollars of your money to administer occupations in Iraq and Afghanistan is not enough, a war against Iran is being talked up. Ever since the Great Depression, the manufacture of weapons and the export of war have been key ways in which the United States has stimulated its economy. Just recently, under President Obama, the United States made a $60 billion arms deal with Saudi Arabia. It hopes to sell thousands of bunker busters to the United Arab Emirates. It has sold $5 billion worth of military aircraft to my country, India, my country, which has more poor people than all the poorest countries of Africa put together. All these wars, from the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki to Vietnam, Korea, Latin America, have claimed millions of lives. All of them fought to secure the, quote, American way of life, end quote. Today we know that the American way of life, the model that the rest of the world is meant to aspire toward, has resulted in 400 people owning the wealth of half the population of the United States. It has meant thousands of people being turned out of their homes and jobs while the U.S. government bailed out banks and corporations. American International Group alone was given $182 billion in the bailout. The Indian government worships U.S. economic policy. As a result of 20 years of the free market economy, today 100 of India's richest people own assets equal to 1/4 of the country's GDP, while more than 80% of Indian people live on less than 50 cents a day. 250,000 farmers driven into a spiral of death have committed suicide. We call this progress and now think of ourselves as a superpower. Like you, we are well qualified, we have nuclear bombs and obscene inequality. The good news is that people have had enough and are just not going to take it anymore. The Occupy movement has joined thousands of other resistance movements all over the world in which the poorest of people are standing up and stopping the richest corporations in their tracks. Few of us dreamed that we would see it, the people of the United States on our side, trying to do this in the heart of empire. I don't know how to communicate the enormity of what this means. The 1% say we don't have demands. They don't know, perhaps, that our anger alone would be enough to destroy them. But there are some things, a few pre-revolutionary thoughts I had for us to think about together. We want to put a lid on this system that manufactures inequality. We want to put a cap on the unfettered accumulation of wealth and property by individuals as well as corporations. As capitalists and Liddites, we demand, 1, an end to cross-ownership in business. For example, weapons manufacturers cannot own TV stations. Mining corporations cannot run newspapers. Business houses cannot fund universities. Drug companies cannot control public health funds. 2, Natural resources and essential infrastructure, water supply, electricity, health, and education cannot be privatized. 3, everybody must have a right to shelter, education, and health care. 4, the children of the rich cannot inherit their parents' wealth. This struggle has reawakened our imagination. Somewhere along the line, capitalism reduced the idea of justice to mean just human rights. The idea and the idea of dreaming of equality became blasphemous. We're not fighting to tinker with reforming a system that needs to be replaced. As a capist and a lidite, I salute your struggle. Salam and Zimbad Dad. That's the end of the book. This is from the very opening of it, chapter 1. Is it a house or a home, a temple to the new India, or a warehouse for its ghosts? Ever since Antilla arrived in Altamont Road in Mumbai, exuding mystery and a quiet menace, things have not been the same. Here we are, the friend who took me there said. Pay your respects to our new ruler. Antilla belongs to India's richest man, Mukesh Ambani. I'd read about this most expensive dwelling ever built, the 27 floors, 3 helipads, 9 lifts, hanging gardens, ballrooms, weather rooms, gymnasiums, 6 floors of parking, and 600 servants. Nothing had prepared me for the vertical lawn, a soaring 27-story high wall of grass attached to a vast metal grid. The grass was dry in patches, bits have fallen off in neat rectangles, clearly trickle down hadn't worked. But gush up certainly has. That's why in a nation of 1.2 billion, India's 100 richest people own assets equivalent to 1/4 of the GDP. And then Arundhati Roy goes on from there talking about how India is kind of an example of capitalism run amok. Capitalism, a Ghost Story by Arundhati Roy.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's Anything Goes Friday. Whether you want to talk about UFOs over Michigan or the fact that fewer than 16,000 donors, this from the Washington Post by Michelle Yeehee. Fewer than 16,000 donors accounted for half the federal campaign contributions in 2016. Half. Super PACs spent $1.1 billion in our last election. $1.1 billion. Super PACs didn't even exist before Citizens United. Wealthy individuals accounted for 64% of the contributions to the Super PACs. So we basically, 16,000 donors accounted for half of all campaign contributions. I would guess that it's probably a few hundred or a few thousand maybe at the most that probably accounted for, you know, somewhere between a quarter and a third, although this doesn't break those numbers out like it should. There's the very real possibility of a government shutdown tonight. We'll see how this goes and what happens and if it happens and all that sort of thing. But the last time we had a government shutdown was when President Obama was president. This was in October of 2013. And the Republicans shut down the government because they wanted to destroy the Affordable Care Act. And it lasted, you know, about 2 weeks, as I recall. According to Standard & Poor's, Haley Miller, writing over at the Huffington Post about this, according to Standard & Poor's, that shutdown, that 2-week shutdown, cost our U.S. economy $24 billion. Of course, as long as, you know, the stock market keeps going up and the rich keep getting rich, Republicans don't care. 850,000 federal workers were furloughed. That means time off without pay. Now, Congress can retroactively return their pay to them and usually does after these things, but they can choose not to, too. All national parks, zoos, and monuments, as well as Smithsonian museums, closed. Now, the Trump administration knows that the national parks are probably the most visible. You know, this is what the news media love to go to. They'll go to a park and interview a bunch of people standing in, you know, in their cars lined up to get into Yellowstone after the gate has closed with a "Sorry, we're closed" sign and interview them. So they're trying to avoid a bad photo op, basically. But, you know, we'll see. Thousands of food inspection workers furloughed. Public health science international programs that ensure meat, poultry, and egg products from foreign countries, and I would add fish, are safe. We won't know. You know, shut the government down, inspections stop. CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, in 2013, they shut down their influenza testing program, including the testing labs and the tracking of flu across the country. And we're in the middle of a national flu. I don't know if it's not a pandemic, but a serious case of national flu right now. Passport offices, small business loan offices, IRS call centers. You want to call the IRS and ask how to do your taxes now that things have been turned upside down so that, you know, $1.5 trillion of national debt could be handed off to billionaires? It does affect all the rest of our taxes. The IRS isn't going to be answering the phone. Sorry. Federal mortgage approval? No, you're not going to get that. You got to, the veterans and unemployment benefits, your check may or may not arrive. During the 2013 shutdown, she writes, reviews of veterans' disability applications slowed significantly. Now, the post office, air traffic control, TSA, the post office, not because it's considered an essential function, although I would consider it that, but because it's independently funded. Post office doesn't take any government money. The post office runs off the cost of stamps, something most Republicans don't even know. So the post office won't shut down. TSA, police departments, things like that, they're considered critical. And Social Security checks will probably still go out, although if you're asking for a replacement card or Medicare information, good luck. And, of course, the special counsel will continue to operate. So we'll see where that goes. I found a fascinating piece by Carol Anderson over at the Huffington Post today. It was titled, she's a new op-ed writer for the Huffington Post. And she's the author of hang on just a second, trying to get to the page here. She's the author of a new book called White Rage, The Unspoken Truth of Our Racial Divide, and has a new one coming out, One Person, One Vote. Carol Anderson is a historian and professor of African-American studies at Emory University in Atlanta. And the title of it was, Why Do Republicans Hate America? And I think it's a really good question. I don't think it's so much that they hate America. I think it's that they hate the ideas upon which America was founded. That is, one man, one vote, egalitarian rule, we the people, of, by, and for we the people. The general welfare, which is mentioned in the preamble of the Constitution, the opening of Article 1, Section 8, the closing of Article 1, Section 8, all of it. I think that's what they hate. And, in fact, I'll back that up in a few minutes. She points out, first, they tried to blow up the Affordable Care Act and deny millions of people health coverage and take us back to the good old days where if you got seriously sick, your health insurance company could just dump you. And when they did this, they didn't hear any hearings. They didn't listen to any expert testimony. And yet this is a sixth of the American economy. They passed a tax bill that adds $1.5 trillion to our deficit with no investments in infrastructure or child care or education or health care or anything to show for it. And then after that, Paul Ryan says, next, we're coming after your entitlements, in quotes, Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid. Yep, that's what the Republicans are after. The 9 out of 10 Americans over 65 who get Social Security and the 49 million Americans who are on Medicare right now. They removed protections, the Republicans removed protections for students against predatory school loan lenders. In August of last year, they sheared millions of acres from public parks so that they could sell them to the highest bidder. They are appointing nominees for lifetime appointments to the federal bench who are demonstrably unqualified, according to the American Bar Association, unqualified. They lied to the American people about so-called voter fraud. They undercut the development and use of renewable energy to suck up to their fossil fuel petro-billionaire donors. The same thing with opening up offshore drilling. They lit a short fuse, she writes, under America's soft power, abdicating our leadership on climate change, removing human rights and democracy as goals of U.S. foreign policy. And no, that's not an exaggeration. Rex Tillerson actually said that. Jeff Flake, Senator Jeff Flake, you know, he's being treated by the media like he's some hero standing up to Trump. Well, he voted to destroy the Affordable Care Act. He voted for the tax code to benefit his donor class, the super rich. And he voted to scuttle the nation's environmental protections. So this is where we're at. So why do the super rich hate America? Well, it's not so much that they hate America, it's that they want to turn America into a third world country. It's a lot easier for billionaires to control the politics of a country if there's not a functioning democracy. I mean, there's countries all over the world where this is absolutely the case. And if you go back to to, sanders.senate.gov/Koch-brothers. Bernie put the 1980 Libertarian Party platform on his website. I'm assuming the link is still good. I printed this out years ago. And this is from literally the platform on which David Koch ran for vice president of the United States in 1980. We urge the repeal of federal campaign finance laws. We favor the abolition of Medicare and Medicaid programs. We favor the deregulation of the medical insurance industry. We favor the repeal of the fraudulent and increasingly oppressive Social Security system. We propose the abolition of the governmental post office. We oppose all personal and corporate income tax, including capital gains taxes. We support the eventual repeal of all taxation. See, if the billionaires had their way and they kneecapped our government and they did away with these programs, what it means is we would become more and more and more dependent upon, quote, charity, in other words, the billionaires. This is what this is all about. We support the abolition of the Environmental Protection Agency. Well, they're getting that. We support the abolition of the Department of Energy. Well, you got Massey writing energy policy for Rick Perry. We want to dissolve the Department of Transportation. We oppose all laws requiring an individual to use seatbelts, airbags, or crash helmets. We want to abolish the Federal Aviation Administration and the Food and Drug Administration.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
This is what David Koch ran for vice president of the United States on. It should tell you why the people that he's funding are willing to do what they're doing. And welcome back. Bill in Old Town, Florida. Hey, Bill, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good.
Yeah, I just kind of want to know, with all these problems we have with our politicians, why we can't just simply hold the oath of office against them. You know?
You mean the oath to uphold
to
defend and protect the Constitution of the United States?
You bet.
Well, then you get into
general welfare is included in there.
Yeah, but what you then get into is this debate about what does general welfare mean? Does it mean the welfare of the billionaires? Does it mean the welfare of all Americans?
Well, maybe we should be arguing that instead of being stomped on all the time.
Yeah, I'm with you. But I agree with you that these guys are violating their oath of office. They're putting party above country would be a real simple way to put it. And that is fundamentally un-American. It's fundamentally unpatriotic. But that's what they're doing. That's what
I'm
they're
a
all
veteran. If I would have done what they're doing, I'd probably be in Leavenworth or something.
Well, I don't know about that, but I mean, if you had done, I mean, this is another story I wanted to get into today. Is another bank just got a slap on the wrist for committing actual felonies. And nobody in the bank is going to go to jail. Nobody in the bank is even being charged. The bank will pay a couple $100 million in fines for billions of dollars in fraud, and everything is good. I mean, this system is so rigged and so corrupt because of these Supreme Court decisions that allow billionaires and banksters to basically own their very own private politicians, and it's wrong.
Well, we got to do something.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Also, I was going to, and that brings me to the point about like with the independent people that are registered independents not being able to vote in a lot of the primaries. In other words, we could lose all those Bernie votes, so to speak.
Yeah, in about the roughly half of states that have closed primaries, where you have to be a member of the party, registered as a member of the registered with the party in order to vote. Yeah.
I was just wondering if maybe you could think about that.
Well, that's something that the individual states are going to have to do, and it's going to be a real heavy lift because both political parties, both the Democrats and the Republicans, like closed primaries. And, in the Republican Party, I don't know of anybody who's arguing for open primaries. On the Democratic side, I mean, Mark Pocan on this program day before yesterday was saying, Congressman Pocan was saying, he prefers open primaries. And I think that that's true of probably most progressives.
Well, maybe what I'm thinking about then is maybe the people that are registered independent need to temporarily think about it might be good to change you know, to Democratic so that we can get over that.
Yeah, if you live in a state that it has closed primaries, yes.
Yeah, especially closed primary states.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
To do that so that we can overcome that, and then we can go back to whatever.
Yeah. It's a start.
My point?
It's a start, Bill. But again, I don't think that this is going to change as long as the Republicans have control. And getting money out of politics isn't going to change as long as Republicans have control, because they exist to serve big money, period. I mean, that has become the defining characteristic of the Republican Party. So I think that's really where we need to start. But yeah, these guys are absolutely violating their oath of office, Bill. Thanks a lot for the call. It's great to hear from you. We'll be right back. It's Anything Goes Friday. Everyone is
Initial
using
election
results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them
in standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here
on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here
on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you 24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
It's Anything Goes Friday. And Russell in Hickory Hills, Illinois. Hey, Russell, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, you're talking about Forbes magazine. I hate to say it, Joe Scarborough was reading it. You got to read it. Today's the one-year anniversary. Do you know our trade deficit under Donald Trump is worse than any 8 years of Obama's administration, he said.
Yeah.
S&P was better under him.
Yeah. Are you talking about the new Forbes cover? This is a special edition, and it's got a picture of Stormy Daniels spanking Donald Trump.
I don't, he said he read it off he was reading it off his computer.
Right, because this is
23.5 under Obama S&P. Today it's 19. Jobs are flattening out. Yeah. Our wages are starting to go under him. Like you said, he's dismantling everything. And then what do you hear? You Democrats in red states better vote for this, because you go home, they're going to pick on you for DACA. I hope we lose them, Tom, because they've got 14 senators that they got to defend pretty soon. By 2040 we'll be the minority of this country, the whites. By 2040, they say.
Right.
And you know what? It's like they're not going to change, so I don't know how they're going to keep those 14 senators. You know who they are: Georgia, Texas, North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada, Colorado. You know the three.
These are the Republicans up for re-election, you mean?
Right. Yeah. Eventually, Tom, that's only 22 years.
Yeah.
That's not a lot of years for them to keep.
Change is going to happen, Russell. And if you really want to, see an example of that, look at Canada. You had Stephen Harper with a conservative government, and Canada just kind of froze in place. And now with Justin Trudeau, Canada is actually the bottom 60% of Canadians are seeing their income growing faster than the top 40% of Canadians, which is how it was in the United States from 1940 to 1980. Reagan, of course, flipped that upside down. Canada is becoming the American dream. It's now becoming the Canadian dream. And now you've got, graduate students from all over the world saying, screw it, I'm not going to go to the United States, but they want to go to Canadian universities. You've got companies in America looking at relocating to Canada because of all these, the lack of infrastructure, lousy broadband, monopoly companies as internet service providers who provide crappy service. I mean, all these things. And yes, our trade deficit is going in the wrong direction, too. Russell, thank you for the call.
I was wondering, I was going to say, where's Bernie Sanders? I see him on TV every day now. I hear Biden and him would make a great ticket. What do you think?
I would vote for that ticket in a heartbeat, Russell. But I'd vote for a lot of other tickets too.
That's the ticket they're going to run on.
Right now,
if
a Democrat has a pulse, I'm voting for him. Russell, thanks for the call. Oh, that's interesting. Here we go. George in Chicago. Hey, George, what's on your mind today?
Hi, let me get you off the speaker, Tom.
Thank you.
I'd like to talk about some other topic than the usual Trumpian nonsense.
Yeah, thank you.
And it's occurred to me that since the Defense Department released that paper a few years ago that going forward for the near future, the largest national security threat we face is global climate change. And I was just wondering, when you were living in D.C. on a houseboat, did you ever hear any discussion as to whether or not the federal government was starting to make plans to fortify the capital against rising waters? After all, Washington by nature is a swamp,
right,
and it's drained by the Anacostia and the Potomac, which are tributaries of one of the great tidal estuaries in the world, the Chesapeake Bay. We've got so much infrastructure above and below ground in the capital that it would seem prudent to begin at least surveying what needs to be done to keep rising sea levels from threatening Washington. I just wondered if you and your houseboat mates ever had any discussions about that.
Oh, we had plenty of discussions about it. I don't know what the government, I would guess right now, since although D.C. is arguably an autonomous city, has its own mayor and city council, they really, anything they do can be basically overridden or stymied by Republicans in Congress. I mean, for example, they decriminalized pot, and then the Republicans stepped in and said, yeah, but nobody can sell it. So, there's this weird catch-22 right now in D.C. With regard to the sea level rise, I'm guessing that the Republicans are not pursuing that at all. And I'm guessing that during the Obama administration, probably some very good planning was instituted. And I'm guessing that the DOD, the Department of Defense, is looking very carefully at what to do about the Pentagon, which is on the banks, not right on the bank, but very near to the Potomac River, and all that sort of thing. But, to the best of my knowledge, none of those details have ever been released. I've never seen anything in writing or, exactly what's going on. But it is something that, around the world, coastal cities are dealing with. London has built, I believe, sea gates, sea walls to protect the Thames and the rest of London. The Netherlands are expanding their programs. I mean, countries all over the world are doing what they can to deal with climate change and sea level rise. The United States, not so much. So, we'll see where this goes. But I'm not. I don't think they're doing anything, George. George, thanks a lot for the call, and thanks for listening to WCPT. We'll be back with more of your calls, my thoughts, and the news of the day. What's the safe word for Donald Trump when he's being spanked by porn stars? Is it possible it's Kofefi? Might it be that it wasn't an Ambien tweet, that he was tweeting out his safe word? I don't know. What do you think?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of your calls right after this.
Today in the Thom Hartmann University Book Club, we're reading from a book by an old acquaintance and colleague of mine, Alan Combs, who passed away this last year. The book is called Thank the Liberals. You're a liberal. If you think you're a conservative, that assertion is surely quite shocking. You may even be so upset upon reading this that you're considering either throwing this book down, shooting a hole in it with your shotgun, or even worse, burning it the way Florida Pastor Terry Jones burned the Koran. Or you may feel the need to toss this book aside even temporarily and find solace in your Bible. However, that's a fairly liberal book too, so it may not help you get any more comfortable than this one will. The very fact that you haven't done any of these things yet shows how open-minded you are. So don't disappoint and go all Terry Jones on me here. If right now you're saying, but Alan, there's no way I'm a liberal, just do me the favor of hearing me out. Exhibit A, to prove my point that you're a liberal, maybe in conservative clothing, is that you're an American. If you're not an American, keep reading. You'll discover how great it is to be one. As an American, you're free right now to put this book down. Go outside for a walk, take a drive, or head to the nearest airport and fly anywhere in the world. Or you can stay home, go online, and get almost any information you want without it being firewalled by the government. And that's largely because liberals have stood up against such regulations as the Stop Online Piracy Act and the Protect IP Act, SOPA and PIPA, that would have squelched free speech on the internet and made criminals out of innocent content providers. This doesn't mean the government hasn't already overreached. When the government knows what websites you're going to because of the very unpatriotic Patriot Act, they're likely not paying too much attention to you and won't do anything about it. You want to leave your job, start a business, go to a food court, gorge out, just goof off. This is the land of the free, so go ahead after you're done with this book. America was founded on a liberal idea. The concept of a representative democracy without a state religion was a move leftward from the motherland, where the Church of England dictated certain laws and mores. Our forefathers thought that a state religion was repressive, and so they established one of our key tenets: freedom of and from religion. There can be no religious test to hold public office in America. That's liberal. A commander-in-chief who's a civilian, not a member of the military, it's liberal. Taxation with representation, that's liberal. A tripartite form of government where no one branch can rule over the others, yep, that's liberal too. Our founders, the ones conservatives revere so much, took these very liberal ideas and made them so much a part of our DNA that America is unthinkable without them. Let's look at some of the parts of our founding documents that often don't get enough press, but show how liberal we are simply because we're American. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution lays out the rights of Congress, stating in part that they have the right to, quote, lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States, end quote. But the government is specifically charged with providing for the general welfare of our population has been much disputed by conservatives. Over time, liberals have fought for numerous items that fall in this category that have greatly benefited Americans, programs conservatives forgot they initially opposed. You'll read about them later in the chapter, Have You Thanked a Liberal Today? Article 1, Section 8 also guarantees your right to your personal intellectual property by saying that Congress has the right to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited time to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. If you invent something or write something, it's not the property of the government. This is why entrepreneurs and scientists flock to America. They know that here they are free to create, and they will get the credit they deserve for their work. Our founding documents established a court system, giving us a way to seek redress from grievances. The Constitution establishes the creation of various courts available for different purposes, depending on the issue at hand. Congress has the authority to create bankruptcy courts and tax courts to handle specific issues. Article 3 says the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as Congress may from time to time ordain and establish, giving us a federal court system and an appeals process. Article 1, Section 9 gives us the right to seek relief from unlawful imprisonment. A prisoner or someone on his or her behalf can petition for a writ of habeas corpus, an order from the government that it has the right to detain the person in question. This protects us from being held arbitrarily by the state without evidence and without just cause. Our entire judicial system outlined in the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments of our Constitution, is built on a liberal idea. The focus is on protecting the individual, especially the minority, from the tyranny of the majority. For example, the presumption of innocence, which is implied by the right to remain silent and the right to a jury, places the burden of proof on the prosecutor. The Fifth Amendment calls for grand juries to protect us from being prosecuted when there isn't enough evidence to bring a case against us. This amendment also guarantees that we can't be tried for the same crime twice, and that we are protected from having to testify against ourselves. This was originally written to guard against torture and forced confessions. Most important, we can't be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. If charged with a crime, there is a process in place to guarantee us a fair trial. This includes being given adequate notice to prepare a defense against those charges. The Fifth Amendment also contains the promise that the government can't take our property away without just compensation. We probably take all this for granted, but that's probably because we've never lived in a country where a terrifying knock on the door at 3 a.m. could mean a phony trial in a kangaroo court or a demand that we leave our homes because someone from the government needs or wants them. The Sixth Amendment continues the discussion of our judicial system through the promise that anyone accused of committing a crime has a right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of peers in the jurisdiction where the alleged crime was committed. You have the right to be told the charges against you, to confront your accuser in court, to have witnesses on your behalf, and to have counsel represent you. Thank the Liberals by Alan Malone.
They're commercial free, and you can listen anytime, any place you want. Welcome back to Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Morris in Long Beach, California. Hey, Morris, what's on your mind? Thanks for listening to KPF.
Hey, no problem, Professor. Good morning to you. Listen, the co-founder of Black Lives Matter has published a book, and it's called When They Call You a Terrorist, Memoirs of the Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. And she was talking about democracy. And I'm not kidding you. I thought of you. She was talking about democracy, and she said democracy is an aspiration. I've never, ever looked at it like that. I always looked at it like it was a euphemism, a mask for terror. But she said it was an aspiration. And I got to thinking, okay, so then we all have that responsibility to make it come to pass. And I also thought of this, the best gift that we could leave those generations that come after us is the ability to have a voice. So everybody get your write-in candidates ready, because we're going to structurally change this system. No Democrats, no Republicans, straight-up write-in candidates. And our people are the kind of people that are arrested at marches, like this guy in California running against Feinstein that's got $40 million serving the public. I don't know how you get amass $40 million being a public servant, but I think his name is De Leon. He got arrested. Those are the kind of people that we want. No violence. Don't need no guns. Don't need no bombs. All we need is paper write-in candidates, and we will change this country in less than 2 years.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying, Morris, except the writing candidates part. I think that that is a prescription to dilute our vote to the point where the Republicans will control this country forever. Respectfully. Okay. I guess Morris is gone. Jason in Vancouver, Washington. Hey, Jason, what's up?
How's it going, Tom?
Good.
I was just curious, how long do you think Congress can, if they don't pass the finance through, how long they could keep Congress closed? And also, like shut down, I mean. And also, let's say Bernie won and progressives took over in 2020, how fast could the United States go completely green? Because I know FDR made things go really fast. I mean, as far as changing the auto industry for the war, but in this case for climate change.
Right.
Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome. With regard to the time on the shutdown, who knows? I mean, the last one lasted about 2 weeks, and you know, it basically lasts until the public pressure gets so great that the politicians do something. And virtually all of these shutdowns, I believe all of these shutdowns. I mean, this is something that Newt Gingrich pioneered. I think it's happened 18 times. Virtually all of these shutdowns have been pushed by Republicans. And this one, of course, you know, Republicans control the House, they control the Senate, they control the White House, and they control the Supreme Court. So if the government shuts down, it's on the Republicans. I mean, it's just real simple math, right? But, you know, what the consequences of that are going to be over the long term, who knows? Who knows? Corky in Hilton, New York. Hey, Corky, what's on your mind?
Hello, Tom. Yeah, this is right in Donald Trump's wheelhouse. People going to work and not getting paid.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what the businesses were all about.
That's what happens to his contractors. Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, I agree, Corky. It's what happens to his contractors. You know, this guy has been involved in over 2,500 lawsuits, the majority of which alleging that he defrauded people, or he didn't pay people, or he didn't keep his end of the deal. The guy has told over 2,000 lies in his first year in office, and it'll be a year tomorrow. Over 2,000 lies. He's a serial liar. He cannot be trusted. And the Republicans are starting to figure this out, that they can't trust him. He says one thing one day, he says another thing another day. He just goes with whatever the last person he talks to, you know, tells him. I mean, that's what's going on, and it ain't healthy at all. Maverick in Edmonds, Washington. Hey, Maverick, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, LTL FTC. That's a long-time listener, first-time caller. Maybe it'll save you some time in the near future.
Thank you.
Pleasure to talk to you, sir. Pardon the noise. I'm working driving a dump truck through Seattle traffic right now. But
cool.
My subject here is I found a convenient and efficient and fun way for you to get around the whole expletive that Mr. Trump actually said, not allegedly, you can call it shifoli, which is kind of a phonetic pronunciation for it. Or I used to say shrimp as a substitute for that word when my young son was growing up.
Yeah,
or that helps.
Or the old name of the shoe polish company, Shinola. Although I...
that's true. That's true.
Yeah, although
I have a question for you.
Sure,
if you have
go
the
ahead.
time.
Yeah.
And one more thing. We shouldn't refer to them as porn stars. Steve McQueen was a star. They are actors or actresses.
Yeah, but she refers to herself as a porn star, so...
That's fine. I can refer to myself as whatever I want. That doesn't make it true.
Okay.
NPR has referenced Trump's expletive as he allegedly said, and according to our sources, he said. Now, I don't understand that. You've been in the media longer than I have. Why do you think they would do that? I mean,
they're saying that
allegedly won the World Series.
Yeah, well, see, the World Series is played in front of everybody's eyes. There were no reporters in the room, and of the people who were in the room, you've got two Republicans, Tom Cotton and David Perdue, who are both saying the president didn't use that word, and then the Secretary of Homeland Security was Kirsten, whatever her name is. She's new to me. Anyway, she's like, oh, I don't remember. I didn't notice. I'm just the top cop in the United States. I don't pay attention to things. I'm sorry. But on the other hand, you had Dick Durbin and Lindsey Graham basically saying, Dick Durbin explicitly, Lindsey Graham implicitly saying, yeah, he said that. So when you've got a he said, or he said, she said situation like we have in this case, it is prudent for a news agency and a news organization, and NPR is nothing if not prudent, to say alleged. I understand that. I wouldn't criticize them for it. I think that you and I, Maverick, and probably pretty much every other American can agree that, all probability he used the word. I'm not so concerned about the word. I'm concerned about the sentiment behind the word, which, and Maverick, thank you for the call, which essentially is that we as a country should basically revert back to the pre-1960s type of immigration policy we had, which maintained the current racial balance in the United States by maintaining the country of origin balance in the United States. From 1924 till, I think it was 66, 67, somewhere in the 1960s, we changed our immigration laws so that, because prior to that, literally, the quota for the number of people from Ireland had to be no greater than the percentage of Irish in America. The quota for the number of people from France or from Ghana or Nigeria or whatever had to be no greater than the percentage of people of that kind of ancestry already in the United States. Well, people get married, people mix together. Very few people are one single ancestry anymore. Those numbers became increasingly meaningless, number one. And number two, it really was just code for racial quotas, to keep America white. And in the 60s, we said, this is crazy. Why are we doing basically race-based admission? And when Trump comes out and talks about he doesn't want people from these countries, and then he says, but we want merit-based admissions, the percentage of people from Nigeria who come to the United States as immigrants, as legal immigrants, who have college degrees is greater than the percentage of Americans who have college degrees. So shouldn't we really be embracing Nigeria? Not according to Trump. That's a blank hole country. So, I think that really what Trump is calling for, as much as he's talking about merit, we know he's not. And beyond that, why should we only honor somebody who's willing to come to this country and work hard if they have a PhD? What about somebody who wants to come to this country and work hard doing things that don't require a college degree? Just the whole thing is racially motivated. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, the president is a racist, and it's becoming quite obvious. Tim in Messick, Michigan. Hey, Tim, what's up? Tim, you're on the air.
Yeah. Hey, listen. It cracks me up about this class war that's going on. And every time we've ever allowed immigrants to come in, it was always because the wealthy, the Carnegies, the Mellons, the Rockefeller, they wanted cheap labor. That's what.
Yep. That's why you call them cheap labor conservatives.
Well, that's what I just call America. You know, when the capitalists want cheap labor and the people that are here are sick and tired of being screwed, oh, well, let's bring in the Irish, let's bring in the Italians, let's bring in Chinese, Germans, who will work for less than people that are already here based on this phony premise that, oh, in America. Okay, but I want to get to the class war, and I need to ask you this question.
Yeah, hang on, it's to say, the answer to your question is that's why you have good, healthy minimum wage, living wage laws. Your question, real quick, Tim, we got 20 seconds.
Yeah. You know, in the wealthiest nation in
Tim,
the world,
can you hear me?
And I know people that live next door to me that I got to donate food to, thanks to the reason that I actually had,
Tim, can you hear me?
To sign a union card.
Tim, can you hear me?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
well, actually, I couldn't, but go ahead.
Yeah, we got 10 seconds. You wanted to make a point? About class war?
No, but I'd love to talk to you personally because you're from Michigan.
Yeah, well, you're talking to me personally.
You come from a union family, and you know what I'm talking about.
I absolutely do. Yep, those of us who remember, who lived through the 60s, 70s, and the early 80s before Ronald Reagan destroyed this country. We remember when this country was a land of opportunity. We remember when a person with a high school degree could raise their kids, provide for their family, and have a decent retirement. We remember what this was like in America once.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Now, if you want that kind of life and that kind of lifestyle, you have to move to Canada or Europe. And by the way, they're not accepting Americans anymore. We'll be back. And welcome back. Jeff, watching Free Speech TV in Jamestown, Tennessee. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today? Jeff? No, Jeff, you have to listen to your telephone, not your television, because there's a time delay. Elizabeth in Farmington, Michigan. Hey, Elizabeth, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. It's a kind of a pretty day here in Michigan, just to let you know.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. I was calling. I picked up the phone when Morris was on the line because I was hearing, what he was talking about with the write-in candidates. It's not so much down on everything else. I think it's a level of frustration that had we been just sitting having a conversation, I would have interjected to just enthrall ourselves. Step back and look more neutrally at all the parties, all the positions, and then make a choice of where we want to go. Your argument is absolutely true. Where else would we go except to make a stronger and stronger Democratic Party for ourselves?
Yes.
I think that the frustration level is that hasn't happened for us, and we seem to be backsliding in that area. So I think it's the disenthrallment just long enough to be able to look at what each has to offer and how we can make something offer what we want.
Yeah.
Some party. So anyway, that's what spurred me on. I love your show. I do feel like it's a conversation every day, and keep up the great work.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I would say, one of the big problems that we have is that within the Democratic Party is that there are still about a little more than a half a dozen senators, for example, and certainly a lot of them in the House as well, who are using the old model that Bill Clinton pioneered in 1992 of getting in bed with big corporations and wealthy donors, the Jamie Dimons of the world kind of thing, and the George Soroses of the world. And they may have, George Soros may have a great heart and all that kind of stuff, but our politicians shouldn't have to get into bed with billionaires in order to stay elected. And what Bernie Sanders proved to us, and what the members of the Progressive Caucus, the Jan Schakowskis and Mark Pokans of the world, Raul Grijalva, demonstrate to us with every election, and Bernie Sanders, is that if you are simply true to your principles, even people who disagree with you will vote for you. I saw that in Vermont. People voted for George Bush and Bernie Sanders, and over and over and over again. But we still have kind of the Joe Manchins of the world who, and Heidi Heitkamp and Claire McCaskill and whatnot, these so-called moderate Democrats, who are really corporate Democrats, and they are still dancing to that old DLC Bill Clinton tune of, you know, we've got to have the big bucks, we got to, you know, and all this kind of stuff, Dianne Feinstein. And you know, I think it's a mistake, and I think over time, those folks are going to get washed out of the Democratic Party as more and more progressives come into it. And I view that as a good and positive thing. And you know, like you said, we need to be strengthening the Democratic Party. And I think we do that by getting inside it. We get it, you know, not just blindly supporting it, but, you know, becoming precinct committee people so that we can say, you know, okay, you know, we want progressives in our primaries. These are the issues that we want to run on. Well said.
Thanks for letting me participate.
Sure, you're welcome, Elizabeth. And sure enough, thank you for the call. We'll be right back with more of your calls on Anything Goes Friday.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity,
resistance, and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you 24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Tom's Beat Stuff. Welcome back. Anything Goes Friday. And Mark in San Diego. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Hey, I so much appreciate your show. I've been listening to you for many years, and I really do appreciate it. Hey, I am calling because, first of all, I'm just blown away by the kids. They are on it. I'm so inspired. The kids are going to pick it up and run with it, but here's the issue they're dealing with. They don't know where to turn for information. I talk to kids. And
you're talking millennials. You're talking young adults, not 10-year-olds.
Well, I'm old, so when I say kids, anyone 30 and under. About.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I figured.
And thank you. And they really are concerned and excited when you tell them information and what to do. And I often give them Bernie Sanders' website and your website. But do you have any suggestions on what to tell kids as far as where to go for information? Because what a lot of people mistake as apathy or selfishness or whatever is actually they just don't know where to turn.
Yeah.
But once they get information, they are on it.
Well, there is progressive media in the United States, and while a lot of people think that, for example, Huffington Post, which is owned by Time Warner, and therefore probably will not be reporting much on corporate mergers, is progressive media, I beg to differ. I'd say it's more kind of media to the left of typical corporate media, but not so much. But there's real progressive media in the United States. On Sirius XM, you've got the Sirius Progress channel, which is a good, solid 24/7 lineup of progressive content. On Free Speech TV, which is on Dish Network, DirecTV, and on cable systems all over the country, and has a huge web presence.
To Free Speech TV. It's a good cause.
Yep, and that's at freespeech.org. You know, that's good progressive media. Now, I'm on both, so I suppose I have a dog in this game, but or fight, or whatever the horrible metaphor is. But there is some good, and there's a growing number of radio stations. We've had 3 stations pick up our show just in the last couple of weeks, 3 new stations. There's a growing number of radio stations and cable systems that are picking up, progressive media. And there's some great progressive publications on the internet out there. You get The Nation, you've got alternate.org, you've got truthout.org, you've got commondreams.org. I would basically give them a media list. My temptation would be to give them a book list, but the fact of the matter is most people, millennial or not, don't have time to read books these days. I would give them a media list and say, here's a great place to start. Mark, I got to move along. But thank you.
Thank you so much again.
You're welcome. Thanks for the call and thanks for your kind words. Jeff in Jamestown, Tennessee. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, hey, Tom. Hey, first-time listener, first-time caller. Nice show. Thanks for your knowledge and spreading the word out on this country where we're at, and nice to hear from other people in the country.
Thank you.
First of all, the first thing is the deficit. We have health care, we have our resources, and we have retirement. There's nothing being addressed about these things right now and being exposed. I think exposure is the number one key, which you are doing, and it's slowly starting up.
Yeah, I mean, basically the legislative accomplishments of the Republican Party in the last 12 months have been, number one, to make it easier for coal mining companies to dump waste in streams. That was the first thing they did. Actually, hey, let's pass a law doing this. And number two, borrowing $1.5 trillion from the Chinese and anybody else who would buy U.S. government bonds, borrowing $1.5 trillion and handing it to the Koch network and all the other billionaires in the United States, and a bunch of big corporations like Apple, who really didn't need the tax break. I mean, and then using that to set up the coming attack on Social Security, the Republican budget that they were going to vote on tomorrow. Now it's been set aside for a continuing resolution, but the Republican budget that's on the table right now, that's already been introduced, has a almost $500 million cut in the Social Security Administration to make Social Security, to make the whole process of applying for Social Security and getting Social Security or Medicare, which is administered by the Social Security Administration, more painful, more difficult, slow down the website, make it so Americans are so frustrated with the system that has worked so well for, 75, 80 years or more, that they will say, okay, privatize it, give it to Wells Fargo and Citibank, that's fine, the Republican strategy is break government and then point to it and say, see, it's broken. We need to privatize it. And if you look at the history of our deficits, the largest deficits have been caused by both policies and happened during the administrations of Republican presidents. And to the extent that Barack Obama presided over a large deficit, it was simply because George Bush had two multi-trillion-dollar wars that he never put on the books. And Obama put them on the books, and all of a sudden, what's this? But it's, this is what's going on. It's the continuous destruction of the government of the United States by a political party that doesn't believe in the government of the United States. They believe in a plutocracy and in an oligarchy and rule by billionaires. Am I making sense, Jeff?
Yeah, I fully understand. I think most of the country realizes, half of the country, I guess, realizes this. And what's happening is there's no exposure. You're exposing it, and there's other smaller, stations that are doing this, and that's the problem. We need a watchdog network, basically, somebody from each state, blue-collar, white-collar, men and women, actually go to the government and have a balance sheet.
Right.
And then
Jeff,
basically
you can hear the music, right?
It's not hard. It's just balancing,
Jeff,
and have everything documented,
Jeff,
laid out,
Jeff,
and find out where the checks are going, find out what's paying off the deficit. And
you're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com. Today on the Thom Hartmann Book Club with Thom Hartmann University, we're reading from what is apparently Donald Trump's second favorite book. His number one, according to his first wife, as I recall, was the collected speeches of Adolf Hitler, which was on his bed next to his, or on his bedstand next to his bed for years. But when he was asked by reporters his favorite book, he said P.T. Barnum's The Art of Money Getting, or Golden Rules for Making Money. So I thought, hey, let's check this out. This is from the introduction. Those who really desire to attain an independence, but have only to set their minds upon it and adopt the proper means, as they do in regard to any other object which they wish to accomplish, and the thing is easily done. But however easy it may be found to make money, I have no doubt many of my hearers will agree it is the most difficult thing in the world to keep it. The road to wealth is, as Dr. Ben Franklin truly says, as plain as the road to the mill. It consists simply in expending less than we earn. That seems to be a very simple problem. Mr. Micawber, one of those happy creations of the genial Dickens, puts the case in a strong light when he says that to have an income of £20 per annum and spend £20 and 6 pence is to be the most miserable of men, whereas to have an income of only £20 and spend but £19 and 6 pence is to be the happiest of mortals. Many of my readers may say, we understand this. This is economy, and we know economy is wealth. We know we can't eat our cake and keep it also. Yet I beg to say that perhaps more cases of failure arise from mistakes on this point than almost any other. The fact is, many people think they understand economy when they really do not. True economy is misapprehended, and people go through life without properly comprehending what that principle is. One person says, I have an income of so much, and here's my neighbor who has the same, yet every year he gets something ahead and I fall short. Why is it? I know all about economy. Well, he thinks he does, but he does not. There are many who think that economy consists in saving cheese parings and candle ends. Keep in mind, this was written in the late 1900s. In cutting off 2 pence from the laundress's bill and doing all sorts of little mean, dirty things. Economy is not meanness. The misfortune is also that this class of persons let their economy apply in only one direction. They fancy that they are so wonderfully economical in saving a half penny where they ought to spend 2 pence that they think they can afford to squander in other directions. A few years ago, before kerosene oil was discovered or thought of, one might stop overnight at almost any farmer's house in the agricultural districts to get a very good supper. But after supper, he might attempt to read in the sitting room and would find it impossible with insufficient light from just one candle. The hostess, seeing his dilemma, would say, it is rather difficult to read here in the evenings. The proverb said, you must have a ship at sea in order to be able to burn 2 candles at once. We never have an extra candle except on extra occasions. Those extra occasions occur perhaps twice a year. In this way, the good woman saves $5, $6, or $10 in that time, but the information which might be derived from having an extra candle would, of course, far outweigh a ton of candles. But the trouble does not end there. Feeling that she is so economical in tallow candles, she thinks she can afford to go frequently to the village and spend $20 or $30 for ribbons and furloughs, many of which are not necessary. This false economy may frequently be seen in men of business, and in those instances, it often runs to paper writing. You find good businessmen who save all the old envelopes and scraps and would not tear a new sheet of paper if they could avoid it for the world. This is all very well. They may in this way save $5 or $10 a year, but being so economical only in note paper, they think they can afford to waste time, to have expensive parties, and to drive their own carriages. This is an illustration of Dr. Franklin's, quote, saving at the spigot and wasting at the bunghole, or penny wise and pound foolish. Punch, and speaking of this one idea class of people, says they are like the man who bought a penny herring for his family's dinner and then hired a coach and 4 to take it home. I never knew a man who succeeded to succeed by practicing this kind of economy. True economy consists in always making the income exceed the outgo. Wear the old clothes a little longer if necessary. Dispense with the new pair of gloves. Mend the old dress. Live on plainer food if need be. So that under all circumstances, unless some unforeseen accident occurs, there will be a margin in favor of the income. Penny here, a dollar there, placed at interest, goes on accumulating, and in this way, the real desire is attained. It requires some training, perhaps, to accomplish this economy, but once used to it, you will find there is more satisfaction in rational saving than in irrational spending. Here's a recipe which I recommend. I have found it to work an excellent cure for extravagance and especially for mistaken economy. When you find that you have no surplus at the end of the year and yet have a good income, I advise you to take a few sheets of paper and form them into a book and mark down every item of expenditure. Posted every day or week in 2 columns, one headed necessities, the other comforts, and the other headed luxuries. And you will find that the latter column will be double, triple, and frequently 10 times greater than the former. The real comfort of life costs but a small portion of what most of us can earn. Dr. Franklin said, "It is the eyes of others and not our own eyes which ruin us. If all the world were blind except myself, I should not care for fine clothes and furniture." It is the fear of what Mrs. Grundy may say that keeps the noses of most worthy families to the grindstone. In America, many persons like to repeat, "We are all free and equal." But it is a great mistake in more senses than one. That we are born free and equal is a glorious truth in one sense, yet we are not all born equally rich, and we never shall be. So anyhow, the book is The Art of Money Getting, or Golden Rules for Making Money by P.T. Barnum. It's actually a pretty good book.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Boy, what a day it is. It's, you know, we have Carl on the line. Great. Okay, let me. There he is. Carl Frisch is on the line with us. Hey, Carl. How are you today?
Well, you know, I work a block away from the orange-faced gremlin, so I've had better weeks.
I fled the city. We're in Portland, Oregon now. Anyhow, yeah. Carl Frisch is the executive director of Allied Progress, the website alliedprogress.org. You can tweet him at Carl Frisch, K-A-R-L-F-R-I-S-C-H, or at Allied Progress. Carl, you have been all over Mick Mulvaney. Let's start out with who he is, where he came from, and then we can get into what he's up to, okay?
Sure. So he's a congressman. Well, he was a congressman from South Carolina. Before that, he was a state legislator. And, you know, since he was an early Trump supporter who found his way into the administration, he's the director of the Office of Management and Budget. So he is deeply involved in all this government shutdown stuff happening right now. But a few weeks ago, or months ago, around Thanksgiving, when Consumer Financial Protection Bureau Director Richard Cordray announced that he would be resigning and going back to Ohio, Trump basically named Mulvaney acting director of the CFPB.
Now, and the CFPB is the agency that protects us from predatory banking activities, basically.
All kinds of stuff. When you have problems with your bank, credit card company, debt collectors, payday lenders, car title lenders, any kind of financial institution that may have screwed you over for whatever reason, or that you're just having problems with. A lot of people contact them when they're having issues with their credit report, for example. Stuff gets fixed real quick. So, you know, over the last 5 years that it's been in existence, this is something that Elizabeth Warren helped Barack Obama bring into existence through the Dodd-Frank Act. Over the last 5-6 years that it's been in existence, it's returned like $14 billion to 25 million Americans. And that's directly from the financial institutions that screwed them over back to their pockets. So, you know, it's a great consumer watchdog. It's the only government agency that is independent of Congress, independent of the White House, and has the power to protect consumers unilaterally.
So if I'm the guy running Citibank or Wells Fargo or Bank of America or another one of these predatory institutions, or a payday lending company or whatever it may be,
right.
and I'm naming the big banks because of the kind of money we're talking about here,
right.
And I'm saying, okay, this institution, I had to give back $1 billion last year
yeah.
because I opened hundreds of thousands of accounts falsely and ripped people off, right? Or millions of accounts, yeah, in the case of Wells Fargo. If I'm looking at $1 billion fine, if I can just throw $5 or $10 million at a former congressman, Mick Mulvaney, or at his political party, or at some of his colleagues, I mean, for an investment of a few million or even $100 million spread over a bunch of Republican congressmen, I can save billions of dollars. That seems like a reasonable investment for a bank to make.
Well, and it's actually more than that. It's not just investing in these Republican congressmen or even in Trump, which is something that happened as well, especially around the inauguration. It's also using that money to lobby, using that money to prop up fake special interest groups, these AstroTurf groups, to say, that things need to change, basically pushing the corporate agenda. So they've spent hundreds of millions of dollars since the CFPB was created to try and destroy it. And now they have one of their guys, one of their own, on the inside trying to destroy it from the inside.
And I understand that he just submitted a new budget request for funding for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Finance Protection Bureau, and that was zero?
That's right.
Tell me about
What's particularly crazy about this, we're right now in the specter of a government shutdown, and Mick Mulvaney is doing backflips to try and keep certain government institutions operating in case there's a shutdown so that the president won't be embarrassed, that there won't be political fallout.
You mean like national parks?
Yeah, national parks, for example.
Right, because they make bad photo ops.
Exactly. At the same time, remember, this is a guy, Mick Mulvaney, who took $1.3 million from industries regulated by the CFPB. At the same time, it was time for him to ask for his quarterly budget. The CFPB is not funded by taxpayers. It's funded by profits at the Federal Reserve. So, it's actually a boon to taxpayers. We've, taken billions of dollars back from the financial industry, and it hasn't cost us a penny. So every quarter, the CFPB requests its budget from the Federal Reserve. This quarter, Mick Mulvaney said, I don't want any money from the Federal Reserve. Instead, I'm going to drain the CFPB's Emergency Reserve Fund. And that fund is there so that the CFPB can weather any kind of rocky financial times. It is a prudent, responsible thing to have such
it's a rainy day
available. Fund. Exactly, a rainy day fund. And sometimes it's even used to compensate victims of financial abuse.
Right. But Mick Mulvaney wants to use that money to operate the agency, and then presumably when that money is gone, he's going to throw his hands up and say, hey, we're out of money. Sorry.
Well, yeah, not only that, but it puts the agency in a much more tenuous position in terms of going after people. And it'll, think of how the right treated the post office over the last 20 years, right? Post office always ran in the black until Republicans made a few small technical changes, which have forced it into the red on occasion. And ever since then, they've talked about what a waste the Postal Service is. Has nothing to do with the Postal Service. They just don't like the Postal Union. So it's similar here, right?
Yeah, it's the largest unionized employer in the country.
The
post office.
To make it look bad. Yeah. And that's exactly what he's doing.
So,
it's so hypocritical.
So, Carl, what can we do about this? We as voters, as citizens, where does, the president, Trump has every right and power, I believe, to put Mick Mulvaney pretty much anywhere he wants inside the...
Well, it's contested currently.
Okay, so tell me about this.
There's, when Richard Cordray left, again, this is an independent government financial watchdog. It's not at the service of the president or the executive branch. It's independent from Congress. It was designed so that Congress couldn't influence it by cutting off its funding. That's why it's not a cost of the taxpayers. It was designed so that the term of the director would span longer than the term of the president, so that the president wouldn't be able to use undue influence over the director. And so when it was developed, they said when the Consumer Bureau's director leaves, the deputy director should become the acting director.
Right, and I've forgotten her name, but there was a woman who was
appointed and confirmed.
Right, there was a woman who was in that position, and she was supposed to take over, and somehow Mick
currently in
Mulvaney,
litigation.
Yeah, and Mick Mulvaney said no. How and why?
Well, they would say that there's conflicting law, and there is a law that says that the president gets to appoint in certain things. What's not up for debate is that the law that created the CFPB laid out specific form of who takes control when somebody becomes unavailable.
Right.
And on top of that, what's certainly not up for debate is that the Bureau was designed to be independent, and putting somebody in control that is a administrator, is a high-level ranking member in the White House, Mick Mulvaney, completely defies the notion that this is an independent government regulator.
Right. So in the minute we have left here, Carl Frisch, we're talking with Carl Frisch. He's the executive director of Allied Progress, alliedprogress.org. Is this going to go to court, or is this something that Congress can do something about?
Well, it's certain the fight over the directorship is currently in court, and there, Maxine Waters is leading the charge in the House, and Senator Warren, Brown, Merkley in the Senate to get the funding straightened out for the CFPB. Ultimately, what's going to be important is that people clue into this issue as something that is vitally important to pay attention to, and they talk to their legislators about this. There are a lot of weak-kneed Democrats and progressives out there that when they don't hear about people's concerns over these financial regulation issues, they think they can get away with doing the wrong thing and then collecting the campaign contributions. So we all need to speak out to our legislators, even if they're solid people on our issues. We need to speak out, and people can do that. Listen to Tom's show. I mean, Tom talks about these issues all the time. Go to our website, alliedprogress.org, or follow us on social media at Allied Progress, because we're updating folks on these issues and how they can take action every day.
Yeah, great stuff. Carl Frisch, alliedprogress.org. Keep up the great work, Carl.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with more of Anything Goes Friday after this. And welcome back. Our poll question yesterday on our YouTube channel was, will the U.S. see a shutdown under Trump? 11% of people said no, the Republicans will prevent it. 2% said no, Trump won't allow it. 5% said yes, the government isn't a money tree. 70% said yes, there will be a government shutdown because Trump doesn't care. And 12% said nobody would notice a government shutdown for several weeks. We'll see where this goes, right? We will see where this goes. Kevin in Chicago. Hey, Kevin, thanks for watching Free Speech. What's up?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call today. Before I begin, I wanted to suggest a possible response to any conservative who toes the false narrative that tax cuts lead automatically to job creation. Mm-hmm. Since they often lead to reduced tax revenues and increased deficits, tax cuts just guarantee, Republicans a sky is falling kind of argument. So the next time you talk to a conservative, ask them how they plan to spend their tax cut or revenue next year. How many personal assistants or cleaning staff will they hire, since according to Republican dogma, that translates automatically into job growth.
Well, I would argue, Kevin, that the rebuttal would be, well, with my extra money, I'm going to buy things, and those things are going to have to be made by somebody, and that creates jobs. And if you're talking about money in the pockets of people who spend 100% of the money they make, which is basically the bottom half of America, maybe the bottom 80% of America, then there's some truth to that. But this tax cut didn't target the bottom 80% of America. It targeted the top 10% of America and America's corporations. So it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I mean, it's a myth that the Republicans continually dish out, and that's the reason for my call today. I wanted to challenge Republican dogma and their talking points. And one suggestion I have is for everyone who's listening to take action on behalf of progressives and their campaigns to get the upper hand on any Fox News spin machine. In order to get elected, progressives need to inspire voters with the truth and their ability to counter all Republican narratives and lies. So what I suggest is leveraging the power of social media to compile an information database of myths and lies that are often spouted, on TV or on the radio. And anyone who uses Twitter has the ability to do some basic journalism by posting links to reputable news sources, articles, YouTube videos, and campaign speeches of Republican candidates, which reveal their deceptions and their hypocrisy. if we use a hashtag like Truth for All, followed by the hashtag of the Republican to whom the article refers to, that can give progressives the ability to search for those hashtags and obtain talking points for their debate preparations, speeches, or political ads. And it's if we make these talking points searchable, then it could be a powerful equalizer for smaller campaigns who lack the resources to do effective opposition research.
And there are two great online resources for exactly what you're talking about, Kevin. One is newshounds.us, and they, we watch Fox so you don't have to is their slogan. And the other is MediaMatters.org. Newshounds.us and MediaMatters.org, and both of these organizations every single day publish stories about specifically identifying the lies that Fox News and others right-wing radio are telling, and with links and documentation and everything else. But yeah, excellent point, Kevin. Thank you very much for the call. Very well said. We'll be back. It's 20 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Singing library, though, yeah. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Margie in Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin. Hey, Margie. Happy Friday. What's up?
Hey, Tom. Last week you had a caller that was wishing that there was an organization that was helping people to get their voter IDs. Mm-hmm. There is.
Okay, tell me about it.
Vote Riders.
I'm sorry?
Vote Riders is a nonprofit organization that is specifically developed to assist people in getting their IDs. They do things like transport people to the DMV. They help them get their birth certificates. They help pay to get people get their birth certificates. This is an organization I have joined. That's my contribution, because I strongly feel that one of the major reasons Wisconsin went to Trump was because of our dumb voter ID law.
I just DuckDuckGo'd Vote Riders, and it's voteriders.org, VOTERIDERS.org. And this is great. I didn't know about this. I need to learn more about this. Maybe we should get them on the air.
If you could get them on the air. I learned about them from a different talk show host on Progressive Channel.
Yeah.
So I just really wanted to get it out to you, because it is an absolute wonderful organization, and they are literally working to get people their IDs.
Great. VoteRiders.org is the website. Margie, thank you for that.
You're welcome. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks. You too. I'm telling you, we have the smartest listeners in the country. Heidi in Bellevue, Washington. Hey, Heidi, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Can you hear me?
I hear you just fine.
Okay. Yeah, I called because I wanted to explain why I'm a social democrat. I think the word social democrat translates more clearly than democratic socialist. But I was raised in the military. My father began in World War II and stayed in either as a civilian or, actually as an officer for about 40 years. And he was a multilingual intelligence officer for a while, and then he did public relations. But anyway, I lived mostly in Germany until I was 13 and a half. And, because of my father's language skills and because he did his graduate work in medieval history, I really, got around. I wasn't confined to the Air Force Base. But I went into, so I mostly, I went to the Department of Defense schools, and I mostly heard about my country. This was before, TV, before they had McDonald's overseas and all that sort of stuff. But so anyway, when I came back when I was 13 and a half, about to start high school, I went into culture shock, and I found that I had more in common as an American military kid with my European counterparts than I did with my American counterparts, civilian American counterparts. And some of the things that I had in common with them, and I've drawn up a list here so I wouldn't forget to tell you, we lived in subsidized housing. We had subsidized child care. I went to very good schools, Department of Defense schools, which are run by the U.S. government. Our school board was actually the U.S. Congress. And, you know, in Europe, the schools are, you know, nationally organized so that, the same amount of money is spent on each kid, that sort of thing. And we had universal health care. It wasn't as pretty as in, like, civilian hospitals here, but like when I had my tonsils out, I was in a ward. But my mother was also a military nurse, and she actually found military nursing much easier, the socialized nursing, than when she went into civilian nursing. Yeah. We had 6-week vacations. We had subsidized resorts. The Americans took over, like in Birch's Garden, they took over all of the Nazi resorts. We used to go on subsidized ski trips once a year. And then we would spend like 4 weeks in the summer traveling. And the thing is, my parents were officers, and officers did better than enlisted men, but it wasn't like obscene, amount. And in Europe, I didn't see this difference in, and I came back before the Reagan administration. It's gotten much worse, but there wasn't this huge difference in. That I even saw in the States before the Reagan administration. So anyway, because I was raised in the military, this is why I'm a social democrat, because I lived like that as an American and had much more in common with my European friends, and when I came back here.
Yeah. This is the Heidi. Thank you. It's a brilliant explication of exactly what's going on. We have democratic socialism or social democracy, as you describe it, in the United States. It's in the military, and it used to be in the university system too. There used to be it was either 10 to 1 or 20 to 1. The most highly paid person couldn't make more than the lowest paid janitor. And you have that same ratio. I think it's a 20 to 1 ratio. Maybe it's 10 to 1 in the military in terms of pay grades.
I don't know. It's just my parents. I noticed that I lived better than my friends who were like enlisted. But I mean, we both lived very well. Maybe we lived in a little bit nicer subsidized housing. Right. But I mean, they lived in nice houses. Right. Right. Or apartments. No, and we went to the same schools. And, the same amount, we went to the same school because we were a federally run school, because our school board was the Congress, the same amount was spent on us, whether you were an officer's kid or an enlisted kid. Right. So, yeah.
Yeah, and we have a single-payer system, healthcare system in the United States. It's called Medicare. It works really well. It's very efficient, and the costs are quite low. We've got, we have...
Well, Tom, I've dealt with Medicare, and I do have to say that the military system, the socialized system, is better. And it is better for the employees because, as I said, my mother was a military nurse. And, when she went into civilian nursing, she had to carry a higher patient load. She had to consider, how much they were willing to pay on each patient. She wasn't able to provide as good because of the profit motive. She wasn't able to spend time with her patients and provide, the care that she wanted to give. Right. She was able to
Heidi,
nurse better in the military.
Can you hear me right now? Can you hear the music?
Medicine. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. Heidi, thank you very much.
Listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be right back with more of your calls on Anything Goes Friday. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Naomi Klein's brilliant new book, This Changes Everything. This from the introduction. A voice came over the intercom. Would the passengers of Flight 3935, scheduled to depart Washington, D.C. for Charleston, South Carolina, kindly collect their carry-on luggage and get off the plane? They went down the stairs and gathered on the hot tarmac. Then they saw something unusual. The wheels of the U.S. Airways jet had sunk into the black pavement as if it was wet cement. The wheels were lodged so deep, in fact, that the truck that came to tow the plane away couldn't pry out loose. The airline had hoped that without the added weight of the plane's 35 passengers, the aircraft would be light enough to pull. It wasn't. Someone posted a picture. Why is my flight canceled? Because D.C. is so damn hot that our planes sank 4 inches into the pavement. Eventually, a larger, more powerful vehicle was brought in to tow the plane, and this time it worked. The plane finally took off 3 hours behind schedule. The spokesperson for the airline blamed the incident on very unusual temperatures. The temperatures in the summer of 2012 were indeed unusually hot, as they were the year before and the year before. And it's no mystery why this has been happening. The profligate burning of fossil fuels, the very thing that U.S. Airways was bound and determined to do, despite the inconvenience presented by a melting tarmac. This irony, the fact that the burning of fossil fuels is so radically changing our climate that it's getting in the way of our capacity to burn fossil fuels, did not stop the passengers of Flight 3935 from re-embarking and continuing their journeys. Nor was climate change mentioned in any of the major news coverage of the incident. I'm in no position to judge these passengers. All of us who live high consumer lifestyles, wherever we may happen to reside, are metaphorically passengers on Flight 3935. Faced with a crisis that threatens our survival as a species, our entire culture is continuing to do the very thing that caused the crisis, only with an extra dose of elbow grease behind it. Like the airline bringing in a truck with a more powerful engine to tow that plane, the global economy is upping the ante from conventional sources of fossil fuels to even dirtier and more dangerous versions. Bitumen from the Alberta tar sands, oil from deepwater drilling, gas from hydraulic fracking, coal from detonated mountains, and so on. Meanwhile, each supercharged natural disaster produces new irony-laden snapshots of a climate increasingly inhospitable to the very industries most responsible for its warming, like the 2013 historic floods in Calgary that forced the head offices of the oil companies mining the Alberta tar sands to go dark and send their employees home, while a train carrying flammable petroleum products teetered on the edge of a disintegrating rail bridge. Or the drought that hit the Mississippi River 1 year earlier, pushing water levels so low that barges loaded with coal and oil were unable to move for days while they waited for the Army Corps of Engineers to dredge a channel. They had to appropriate funds allocated to rebuild from the previous year's historic flooding along the same waterway. Or the coal-fired power plants in other parts of the country that were temporarily shut down because the waterways that they draw into cooler machinery were either too hot or too dry, or in some cases both. Living with this kind of cognitive dissonance is simply part of being alive in this jarring moment of history, when a crisis that we have been studiously ignoring is hitting us in the face. And yet we're doubling down on the stuff that caused the crisis in the first place. I denied climate change for longer than I care to admit. I knew it was happening, sure, and not like Donald Trump and the Tea Party years going on about how the continued existence of winter proves it's all a hoax. But I stayed pretty hazy on the details and only skimmed most of the news stories, especially the really scary ones. I told myself the science was too complicated and that the environmentalists, they're dealing with it. And I continue to behave as if there was nothing wrong with the shiny card in my wallet attesting to my elite frequent flyer status. A great many of us engage in this kind of climate change denial. We look for a split second and then we look away. Or we look but then turn it into a joke. More signs of the apocalypse, which is another way of looking away. Or we look but tell ourselves comforting stories about how humans are clever and will come up with a technological miracle that will safely suck the carbon out of the skies or magically turn down the heat of the sun, which I was to discover while researching this book is yet another way of looking away. Or we try to look, we look but try to be hyper-rational about it. Dollar for dollar, it's more efficient to focus on economic development than climate change, since wealth is the best protection from climate extremes, weather extremes. As if having a few more dollars will make much difference when your city is underwater, which is a way of looking away if you happen to be a policy wonk. Or we look but tell ourselves we're too busy to care about something so distant and abstract, even though we saw the water in the subways in New York City and the people on the rooftops in New Orleans and know that no one is safe, the most vulnerable least of all. And though perfectly understandable, this too is a way of looking away. Or we look but tell ourselves that all we can do is focus on ourselves, meditate and shop at farmers markets and stop driving, but forget trying to actually change the systems that are making the crisis inevitable, because that's too much bad energy and it'll never work. And at first it may appear as if we are looking, because many of these lifestyle changes are indeed part of the solution, but we still have one eye tightly shut. Or maybe we look, really look, but then inevitably we seem to forget. remember, and then forget again. Climate change is like that. It's hard to keep in your head for very long. We engage in this odd form of on-again, off-again ecological amnesia for perfectly rational reasons. We deny it because we fear that letting in the full reality of this crisis will change everything. And we are right. And the book is This Changes Everything by Naomi Klein.
/podcast. They're commercial free and you can listen anytime, any place you want.
Welcome back. It's Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. And Tyler in Milwaukee, you want to disagree with the woman who called a little bit ago saying that she had an extraordinary experience growing up in the military overseas?
Yeah, I would, Tom. I appreciate you taking my call. I am in the military, and full disclosure, I am a conservative. I do enjoy listening to your show from time to time. I will be honest, I like your show over Rush's, so there's something.
Well,
but
thank you, Tyler.
yeah, I wanted to talk about, she enjoyed a great lifestyle. Her parents are both officers, so that definitely helps. But as you know, the military spending in our country is probably the highest. It's obviously the most funded military in the world.
Sure, $700 billion a year. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's incredible. I'm one of the conservatives that will never advocate for more military spending.
Yeah, but more than half of that money is going to military, so-called defense contractors. That's
exactly what I was going to bring up. We spend a nauseatingly high amount of money on contractors, and because we contract out everything. We contract out repairs, we contract out housing, we contract out.
Right, and you can thank Reagan for this trend. I mean, he did what Harding campaigned on in 1920 and did. Harding's campaign theme in 1920, the Republican running for president that really set up the Great Depression, was more business in government, less government in business. In other words, privatize and deregulate. And Reagan started us down that road, and here we are now where about half of the NSA budget is going to contractors, which is crazy. I mean, that Ed Snowden worked for a contractor. About half our military budget is going to contractors, and we got this bizarre situation where during the war in Iraq, well, it's still going on, but early on it actually made headlines where you had Halliburton and other companies providing, for example, cooks to soldiers in the field. And back when it used to be soldiers who were pulling KP duty, if the base was getting overrun, they'd just drop the cooking utensils and pick up their rifle, and boom, they're a soldier. But when it's a contractor, you've got to have a soldier who protects the contractor who is cooking the food, which is crazy also. But anyhow, was that your point, Tyler, or were you critical of the fact that in the military you get subsidized housing, you get free health care, you have basically kind of a European system?
It is somewhat of a European system, but my point was that even without the contracting, it's incredibly expensive. So I was going to give a quick example. If I go TDY to somewhere, say like Cyprus, and I actually know a guy who this is coming from a guy who went TDY to Cyprus, and he gave me this info. He said every day you can get almost $300 in per diem, and per diem that's per day.
Right.
That's on top of your base pay.
Right.
That's on top of your housing allowance, which is supposed to pay rent back home. That's on top of sustenance allowance, which is supposed to buy you food. It's on top of family separation. You get all these different allowances, and obviously that's great for me if I deploy there because I get money. But you can see that's just absolutely unsustainable to have any kind of model even close to that for people here in the country.
Yeah, but the reality is, Tyler, that out of a $700 billion annual budget for the DOD, that's got to be way less than even $500 million. And in fact, it's probably less than $250 million in terms of the extra money that you guys are getting. I mean, that's money going to the human beings. Human beings are not, I don't have that much of a problem with it on the one hand. On the other hand, the DOD has never, ever been audited. And the best we can tell, and this was an effort that was jointly done by Ron Paul and Bernie Sanders a few years back, is that the Department of Defense has lost $2 trillion over, basically since World War II.
Sure.
So I'm all in favor of accountability for the military. I'm not so bent out of shape about the military, particularly since pay isn't all that great in the military. As you know, you're in the service. I'm not so bent out of shape about the fact that you can get $300 per diem for being deployed overseas, even to a nice place like Cyprus. I think that we should be paying our soldiers well. In fact, I think that we should expand. We should go back to another GI Bill, because we know that from the last GI Bill, the original GI Bill, for every dollar that we spent giving free college and subsidizing mortgages for our returning soldiers, we got $7 additional back in tax revenue we never would have seen had they not been as well educated or as stably housed. So,
Sure.
I'm okay with a little sloppiness, but when it has to do with people, I'm not okay with a lot of sloppiness when it comes to do with defense contractors. Thomas Frank, the guy who wrote the book What's the Matter with Kansas, has a video floating around on the internet that you can see where he went in his car with a handheld video camera and drove into the gated communities just north of Washington, D.C., in the Alexandria, Virginia, and all that area where the defense millionaires live, the senior executives and the major stockholders in the defense industry. And it's 30-room mansion, with a little house next to it for the servants' quarters, one after another after another after another. I mean, these just giant palatial mansions. It has now become the wealthiest zip code in the United States. It used to be Beverly Hills was, with Hollywood money. But now the wealthiest zip code in the United States is just north of Washington, D.C., and it's all money coming from defense contractors. And that's crazy. That's just crazy.
No, I'm with you. I'm all about the accountability. That's probably something that
yeah. Okay.
definitely agree with you.
Tyler, it's nice to agree with a conservative. I got to move along, but thank you for the call.
All right.
Appreciate the call. And thanks for listening to AM 1510 in Milwaukee. Let's see here. Chris in Humphrey, Arkansas. Hey, Chris, what's on your mind today?
Hello. Yes. I've been a fan of your show since April of 2011. My account of events on April 13th, 2011, my patent came back for my green energy device. And on April 14th, that is the day that I recall that the Tea Party shut down our entire government.
Well, you got your patent just in time, didn't you?
I beg your pardon?
I said you got your patent just in time, didn't you?
Well, it was a provisional patent. And I only needed that for a SBIR, Small Business Innovation and Research Grant. And I called back on the 14th, and, after much hair being caught on fire on that day, and, about a Tea Party shutdown, because the news previous to that was, oh, yes, the Republicans are going to work with the Obama administration. But now then, okay, you said it was late 2013 that occurred. I recall 2 years of gnashing of teeth in that regard. I don't know.
I was referencing an article in today's Huffington Post that talked about when it was, but I could be wrong, or the article could be wrong, or maybe there was more than one. There have been 18 of them since this trend started during the Clinton administration.
Yeah, a lot to take in there. But now that I have mentioned the fact that I have an expired provisional patent on a green energy device, would you like to know more about that? And
that's
I've done with it in 6 years.
If you can summarize it in less than 30 seconds, Chris, go for it.
SingleChimneyFlueTower.com. One word, no caps.
Okay.
You want to look that up someday?
Okay.
Or shall I call back later with that?
I will check it out. Chris, thanks a lot for the call, and good to hear from you. Anita in San Antonio, Texas. Hey, Anita, what's on your mind today? Anita? No? Okay, Anita's not there. Huh. Nita's usually pretty good about catching her phone. Rich in Greenwood, Indiana. Hey, Rich, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, thanks a lot. As a technical report to the sound engineer, the balance is not as it has been. The static, as I sign on, is really strong, and that breaks that bump audio that is the faux static. Additionally, is really strong compared to the accompanying music. I hope that's of some. As I tried to just lay that all out.
Yeah, we're gathering all the information we can. We rebuilt our studio, and we're trying to find all the little remnant gremlins. I think we've got most of it under control, but we still have some tweaking to do, which we'll be probably paying attention to over the weekend. But you wanted to talk about COINTELPRO and the unions?
Well, here's the thing. You had a caller who was on the verge of drifting off a positive message into describing a concern about having to donate food to somebody who didn't have it, and it was, I guess, perhaps maybe there was an inequity of the system that created that, and maybe that was going to be the further fleshing out of the idea.
Okay.
But
you got 20 seconds here, Rich.
Getting back to, as you've just described, what I was calling in on. When I was growing up, I learned about the civil rights movement, and I saw photographs of people having fire hoses sprayed on them, and it was explained why that was happening. And the thing that wasn't in that photograph was the people holding the hose.
Right.
Was the firemen who had Birmingham Fire Department on the back of their jackets, and they're in unions, and so are cops, and they are a Trojan horse to amalgamated American labor, and they have no place in the mix. And it's COINTELPRO that's part of this deception.
Okay, Rich, thank you for the call. You make an interesting point. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
You know, I totally support the right of people to unionize. That said, in many ways, the police unions are becoming quite problematic. And welcome back. Michael watching Free Speech TV in Imperial Beach, California. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Hey, Mr. Hartman. Okay, well, first, I'd rather get sprayed by a water hose than shot in a tent like the robber barons used to do. But about your opening premise that the Republicans want to turn our country into a third world nation, which I completely agree with. Once all Americans who are not morbidly rich finally accept that, yes, this is their goal, and if we really start protesting on a massive scale, which would make Occupy look like a child's play, given that we've seen how other third world nations handle their situations, how would the morbidly rich direct their Republican politician puppets to handle our situation of all Americans saying, no, we don't want to be a third world nation? Martial law? Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, well, that's the question, Michael, and there are people who are concerned that there's going to be some sort of a false flag operation, or that Donald Trump is simply inviting another 9/11, seeing how successfully the Republican President George W. Bush and Dick Cheney, with their constant terror alerts and their constant be afraid, translated 9/11 into great political power and great political success. And Cheney took Halliburton, which was literally on the verge of bankruptcy when he was elected vice president, the company that he had been the CEO of back when they'd been illegally doing business with Iran in violation of federal law. Dick Cheney, he took that company, as vice president, made him rich and made Halliburton rich, turned it into a giant, multi-billion-dollar corporation. So, I think that Trump has seen it before. I'm sorry, Michael, you're still there?
Yeah, still here. I agree, but again, like we said, in the 1917, when they shot people, that's how the robber barons used to handle strikes back then. They shot people in their tents.
Yeah.
Yeah,
look up Ludlow Massacre sometime if you want more on that. And Michael, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Very, very well said. Steve, watching Free Speech TV in New Boston, Michigan. Hey, Steve, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I was just wondering about how
the people are going to feel when this country ends up in a war that is so big that the government has to call back a draft, and their sons and their grandsons are being sent off to a war that they don't believe in, and yet it's going to happen.
They'll probably do what George W. Bush.
Friends all the time. I'm a
Steve?
Democrat, but I argue with my Republican friends all the time about what's going on, and they just don't want to listen.
Steve?
So what I want to say is, when your children,
Steve?
this war, remember, you voted for it.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to say, because it's coming. And our young people are going to go off to fight in a war that none of us believe in.
I got it. Steve, you can hear me now, right? You can hear me, Steve?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Is my voice real faint?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. I would predict that they will not do that they will not institute a draft. That was Lyndon Johnson's, quote, mistake from the point of view of these people today. And I would submit to you that they will do what George W. Bush did and start offering $10,000 signing bonuses for the volunteer army. What do you think?
I don't know if that's going to produce enough people to fight the kind of war.
Then they'll raise it to 20,000. There's a lot of poor people in this country. I mean, one of the things that Reaganomics has done is it massively expanded the number of poor people. We have more people in poverty in the United States than we have ever had in the United States in the history of this country. In fact, I'd argue that we have more people in poverty in this country than probably the entire population of the United States up until around the 1850s. So, you know, there's plenty of cannon fodder, as it were, out there. Steve, thanks for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech. We'll be right back. Check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. The Talk Media News Service program, this piece of our program sponsored by or brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoats.com and Ellen Ratner's new book, Loving What You Do. On the line with us, the chief foreign correspondent for Talk Media News based at the United Nations, Luke Vargas. Hey, Luke.
Hey, Tom. How are you?
Good. So the DOD is laying out a new U.S. defense strategy today. And this is I understand, the first update since 2014. What does that mean? What are the takeaways?
Well, we heard from the Defense Secretary Jim Mattis presenting this earlier today. He did not, in his presentation in Washington, highlight what I think is the most noteworthy thing within this strategy, which is that the U.S. is acknowledging that we are confronting what we're calling revisionist powers, Russia and China. And we basically need to build up, according to this report, a military that is capable of defeating those major powers, which is a big ask that is slipped in sort of subtly into this report, but seems to underline a lot of it, which is that, you know, we've got to make the military a lot bigger and capable of holding off an all-out war against China, which, again, is just sort of seems to run contrary to the approach that President Trump has been articulating in his dealings with that country.
So basically, they're pitching a new Cold War?
Yeah, I mean, they said, look, we haven't seen anything like this, you know, since the end of World War II, you know, or really like the breakdown of the international order. And I didn't catch your whole conversation with the last caller before this segment, but you were talking about, you know, paying people to get into the Army. And I was just hearing that and thinking about what I heard this morning from Mattis. I mean, I just don't know exactly how you get from A to B. Now, I think a lot of this is probably posturing. Of course, you know, on one hand, we're supposed to be told that Jim Mattis is sort of the voice of reason who keeps Donald Trump in check and preventing him from doing any of these reckless things that he might be tempted to do on a whim. At the same time, I think we have to be pretty clear-eyed in acknowledging that anybody who's leading the Pentagon, frankly, has a strong vested interest in trying to get as much money for that for the Pentagon as possible, and Trump seems willing to do that. So Mattis is going to say whatever needs to be said in order to make the case that they need all the money they can get. I mean, and he led off this presentation this morning saying basically because of what he saw as funding shortages to the military, that America's competitive edge against other militaries is eroding in all respects, which, again, if you just look at American military spending compared to every other country on earth, That seems like an outlandish claim, but it's exactly what Mattis was saying today.
Is it possible that one piece of this is that the Chinese get a hell of a lot more bang for their buck? I mean, we pour money down the throats of these giant defense contractors, you know, for $500, you know, screws and
Sure.
$2,000 toilet seats and stuff. Probably China's not doing that. Probably Russia's not doing that. They don't. I'm guessing that they don't have large defense industries like we do that are just run on a for-profit basis. You think that has anything to do with it, or is that just kind of peripheral to this?
Well, I think it's hugely important. The question is, you know, I don't think it's even a question. I don't think the U.S. military or the U.S. could spend enough to be able to outpace the growth of the military in a place like China because of precisely how expensive it is to do that kind of work here.
Yeah.
You sort of at some point have to realize, be it if it's on infrastructure spending or on military spending, that the way things done here are so inefficient by comparison that, you know, going toe to toe is going to be impossibly expensive. But that's what he's saying. The other real part of this I found interesting, this is not something I'm prepared to talk too much about because I'm not coming fully prepared on this topic, but space policy. You know, we've been hearing the militarization of space is something that the U.S. Air Force has been pursuing for some years now, and they've now, I think are spending about $10 billion a year. Almost all of that is top secret, so they're not communicating to the public exactly what we're doing with our military assets in space, but we profess to be doing it peacefully, that we're not putting any armaments in space. That is, contradicted by several reports which suggest we have been putting things into space which might be able to disable satellites or, you know, at least spy on other countries there. And this one line from Mattis really caught my attention because there's a push here at the United Nations to do arms control in space, to sign treaties that, you know, prohibit various sorts of militarization in the upper atmosphere and beyond. And Mattis, I thought this was surprisingly candid, talking about the way the U.S. views international agreements. He said, you know, eventually we may be interested in joining an arms control process for space. But for the time being, we're going to do all we can as the military to make sure our diplomats have the upper hand when they go to the negotiating table, which was a very, again, candid way of saying, we're going to militarize space first. And once we've done that and we have an edge over everyone else, then we might be willing to sit down at the negotiating table and ban everybody else from doing what we've just done. That's the kind of thing we know is the way the U.S. treats international agreements, and I see all the time here at the United Nations. But it was sort of a moment of candor.
Yeah.
That's exactly what the U.S. intends to do in the atmosphere as well.
This really reminds me of the, what was the name of the Greek philosopher? Thucydides, something or other? Thucydides trap, you know, which is that when an emerging power starts seriously nipping at the heels of the military power of an existing power, it's a prescription for war. That's very concerning. Luke, we have about 45 seconds. Turkey has begun a military offensive in Syria. I'm guessing we're not happy about that. What's going on?
Well, they're going after these Kurdish groups that we've started to help train as a part of a Syrian border defense force, and it's caused a huge rift between these two NATO.
Yeah, Erdogan hates the Kurds. There's a lot of
mistrust. Yeah. We'll see. I think at the very least, these Kurds probably won't go into Turkey to attack them, but it's very likely the weapons that we give them will end up in Turkey at some point, and Turkey is just trying to head this off before it ever transpires.
Is the Kurdish independence movement in Turkey large and substantial, or is it merely an irritant to Erdogan?
I think it's large and substantial, but it lacks many of the tools politically to be able to do anything about it, which is the opposite of the situation we saw in Iraq.
Yeah, fascinating, fascinating. Luke Vargas, it's always... I always learn something talking to you. You can follow Luke, by the way, at The Courier, Courier. Luke, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Tom. Talk to you soon.
Yep, good talking with you. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Naomi Klein's brilliant new book, This Changes Everything. This from the introduction. A voice came over the intercom. Would the passengers of Flight 3935, scheduled to depart Washington, D.C. for Charleston, South Carolina, kindly collect their carry-on luggage and get off the plane? They went down the stairs and gathered on the hot tarmac. Then they saw something unusual. The wheels of the U.S. Airways jet had sunk into the black pavement as if it was wet cement. The wheels were lodged so deep, in fact, that the truck that came to tow the plane away couldn't pry out loose. The airline had hoped that without the added weight of the plane's 35 passengers, the aircraft would be light enough to pull. It wasn't. Someone posted a picture. Why is my flight canceled? Because D.C. is so damn hot that our planes sank 4 inches into the pavement. Eventually, a larger, more powerful vehicle was brought in to tow the plane, and this time it worked. The plane finally took off 3 hours behind schedule. The spokesperson for the airline blamed the incident on very unusual temperatures. The temperatures in the summer of 2012 were indeed unusually hot, as they were the year before and the year before. And it's no mystery why this has been happening. The profligate burning of fossil fuels, the very thing that U.S. Airways was bound and determined to do, despite the inconvenience presented by a melting tarmac. This irony, the fact that the burning of fossil fuels is so radically changing our climate that it's getting in the way of our capacity to burn fossil fuels, did not stop the passengers of Flight 3935 from re-embarking and continuing their journeys. Nor was climate change mentioned in any of the major news coverage of the incident. I'm in no position to judge these passengers. All of us who live high consumer lifestyles, wherever we may happen to reside, are metaphorically passengers on Flight 3935. Faced with a crisis that threatens our survival as a species, our entire culture is continuing to do the very thing that caused the crisis, only with an extra dose of elbow grease behind it. Like the airline bringing in a truck with a more powerful engine to tow that plane, the global economy is upping the ante from conventional sources of fossil fuels to even dirtier and more dangerous versions. Bitumen from the Alberta tar sands, oil from deepwater drilling, gas from hydraulic fracking, coal from detonated mountains, and so on. Meanwhile, each supercharged natural disaster produces new irony-laden snapshots of a climate increasingly inhospitable to the very industries most responsible for its warming, like the 2013 historic floods in Calgary that forced the head offices of the oil companies mining the Alberta tar sands to go dark and send their employees home, while a train carrying flammable petroleum products teetered on the edge of a disintegrating rail bridge. Or the drought that hit the Mississippi River 1 year earlier, pushing water levels so low that barges loaded with coal and oil were unable to move for days while they waited for the Army Corps of Engineers to dredge a channel. They had to appropriate funds allocated to rebuild from the previous year's historic flooding along the same waterway. Or the coal-fired power plants in other parts of the country that were temporarily shut down because the waterways that they draw into cooler machinery were either too hot or too dry, or in some cases, both. Living with this kind of cognitive dissonance is simply part of being alive in this jarring moment of history, when a crisis that we have been studiously ignoring is hitting us in the face. And yet we're doubling down on the stuff that caused the crisis in the first place. I denied climate change for longer than I care to admit. I knew it was happening, sure, and not like Donald Trump and the Tea Party years going on about how the continued existence of winter proves it's all a hoax. But I stayed pretty hazy on the details and only skimmed most of the news stories, especially the really scary ones. I told myself the science was too complicated and that the environmentalists, they're dealing with it. And I continue to behave as if there was nothing wrong with the shiny card in my wallet attesting to my elite frequent flyer status. A great many of us engage in this kind of climate change denial. We look for a split second and then we look away. Or we look but then turn it into a joke. More signs of the apocalypse, which is another way of looking away. Or we look but tell ourselves comforting stories about how humans are clever and will come up with a technological miracle that will safely suck the carbon out of the skies or magically turn down the heat of the sun, which I was to discover while researching this book is yet another way of looking away. Or we try to look, we look but try to be hyper-rational about it. Dollar for dollar, it's more efficient to focus on economic development than climate change, since wealth is the best protection from climate extremes, weather extremes. As if having a few more dollars will make much difference when your city is underwater, which is a way of looking away if you happen to be a policy wonk. Or we look but tell ourselves we're too busy to care about something so distant and abstract, even though we saw the water in the subways in New York City and the people on the rooftops in New Orleans and know that no one is safe, the most vulnerable least of all. And though perfectly understandable, this too is a way of looking away. Or we look but tell ourselves that all we can do is focus on ourselves, meditate and shop at farmers markets and stop driving, but forget trying to actually change the systems that are making the crisis inevitable, because that's too much bad energy and it'll never work. And at first it may appear as if we are looking, because many of these lifestyle changes are indeed part of the solution, but we still have one eye tightly shut. Or maybe we look, really look, but then inevitably we seem to forget. Remember and then forget again. Climate change is like that. It's hard to keep in your head for very long. We engage in this odd form of on-again, off-again ecological amnesia for perfectly rational reasons. We deny it because we fear that letting in the full reality of this crisis will change everything. And we are right. And the book is This Changes Everything by Naomi Klein.
Germany.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
The Southern Poverty Law Center is reminding us, and there was a great thread by Sun Lee over at Democratic Underground pointing this out, and thanks for the tip on that. Although I try to keep up with what Southern Poverty Law Center is doing, because they're doing just great work, that we're not paying attention to white right-wing terrorists in the United States. And they actually represent the greatest threat to this country right now. If you measure the number of people who've been killed by terrorists in the last 20 years, the majority have been right-wing terrorists. And so they posted this link, and a few of them, like August 12th, 2017, James Alex Fields, 20, of Maumee, Ohio, was arrested in Charlottesville, Virginia, after driving his car at a high rate of speed into a crowd of counter-protesters. He's, of course, the one who killed Heather Heyer. Jerry Drake Varnell, 23, of Sarah, Oklahoma. This was on August 12th of last year, the same day, is arrested after a months-long investigation by federal agents after he attempted to remotely detonate what he thought was a 1,000-pound vehicular bomb outside the Bank First building in downtown Oklahoma City. Varnell had expressed sympathy for so-called 3% ideology and wanted to start the next revolution. He said, "I'm out for blood," to an FBI informant. May 26th of last year, Jeremy Joseph Christian, 35, arrested after allegedly harassing two young women in a Portland, Oregon train. He told the women to go back to their country, then allegedly stabbed 3 bystanders when they tried to intervene. 2 of them died of their wounds. Taleshan Muridin Nakameshe and Ricky John Best, 23 and 53 respectively, died. A third, Micah Fletcher, 21, survived. Christian served 13 months in prison in 2002 for having an illegal weapon in the Multnomah County Detention Center, and was convicted in 2011 of federal charges of being a felon in possession of a firearm. He had also expressed a multitude of political views on his face page and appears to have adopted far-right extremist positions, including an admiration for Oklahoma City bomber Timothy McVeigh, support for a whites-only area in the Pacific Northwest, and support for the removal of mosques. He also gave Nazi salutes at an April free speech rally in Portland, free speech in quotes. May 16th, 2017, Broadwater County, Montana. Sheriff's Deputy Mason Moore, 42, shot and killed near Three Forks, west of Bozeman. While involved in a pursuit of a vehicle he tried to stop for a traffic violation, the occupants of the vehicle engaged highway patrol officers in gunfire through several counties while under pursuit until finally being stopped by tire deflation devices in Powell County. The vehicle's passenger, Marshall Barris, 38, continues to fire at law enforcement. Upon exiting the vehicle and is shot, he dies the next day. The vehicle's driver, Lloyd Barris, 68, the father of Marshall, surrendered at the scene. Lloyd has lived in Bakersfield, California, and posted pro-Trump materials on his Facebook page, as well as links to various anti-government and conspiracy theory sites. March 22nd of last year, James Harris Jackson, 28, is arrested after he turns himself in at a Manhattan police precinct where he confesses stabbing Timothy Kaufman, 66, to death with a sword on a city street March 20th after traveling to New York City to allegedly hunt and kill black men. Jackson, who is white, allegedly stabbed Kaufman, who is black, as a, quote, practice run to killing others and deterring white women from race mixing, his phrase. Jackson, an Army veteran, tells a media source following his arrest, the white race is being eroded. February 22nd of last year, Adam Purinton, 51, of Olathe, Kansas, is arrested in Clinton, Missouri after telling a bartender at an Applebee's he needed a place to hide after having killed 2 Middle Eastern men. Puritan allegedly shot 2 men in that bar after telling them to, quote, get out of my country. October 14th of last year, 3 members of a Southwest Kansas militia dubbed the Crusaders are arrested after an 8-month investigation on charges stemming from a plot to attack a housing complex in Garden City, Kansas that houses a mosque. Curtis Allen, 49, Gavin Wright, 49, both of Liberal, Kansas, and Patrick Stein, 47, of Dodge City, allegedly stocked firearms and explosives and planned to use 4 explosive-laden vehicles to attack the complex, which is home to a number of Somali immigrants. August 27, Joseph Garriulo, this is all just last year. Joseph Garriulo, 40, is arrested in Massachusetts by the FBI for allegedly threatening to kill President Obama, to burn down a mosque, and to kill Homeland Security officers. In his home, investigators find assault rifle ammunition, parts to assemble AR-15 rifles, chemicals to build incendiary explosive devices, and handwritten notes threatening violent attacks against Muslims. July 17, 2016, Gavin Eugene Long, 29, of Kansas City, Missouri, kills 3 Baton Rouge, Louisiana police officers in a coordinated ambush-style attack, then dies in a shootout with law enforcement. Long went by the name Cosmo Setaprina and had declared himself an anti-government sovereign citizen. July 7, 2016, Army reservist and Afghan veteran Micah Xavier Johnson, 25, shoots 12 police officers, killing 5 of them in downtown Dallas after a Black Lives Matter protest. 2 protesters were also wounded. Johnson barricades himself in a building at El Centro College and tells a hostage negotiator that he wanted to kill white people, especially white officers. Johnson, who has expressed support for several black separatist groups on Facebook, dies when a police robot detonates a bomb near him. He's sort of the other side of this, a black guy going after white people, but it's like, what? We're stoking racial divisions constantly? I mean, look at the kind of rhetoric that's been coming out of the Republican Party all these years. January 2nd, 2016, now we're back to the year before last, armed anti-government militants occupy the Malheur National Wildlife. Well, we've seen all this stuff. Lest we forget, this is happening here. And, we need to take this stuff very, very seriously. Grant in Kenmore, Washington. Hey, Grant, it's Anything Goes Friday. What's on your mind today?
I would just like to invite you and you, the listeners, we, the people, to go out and participate this weekend. There's a lot going on.
Yep, the Women's March is tomorrow, all over the country.
Well, no, what I was going to go after is people should go out and go camp and get some fresh air and enjoy themselves while they still have public lands to put their 2 feet down on.
Well, we may or may not at midnight, but I would say that the really important thing that's happening this weekend is not camping. It is the Women's March, and I think that people really should be seriously thinking about showing up and participating, or at least supporting it via social media. Ron in Peoria, Illinois. Hey, Ron, what's on your mind today?
Well, hey, Tom, it's a pleasure to get a chance to get on the show. There was a caller earlier. I'm from downstate Illinois, and I feel like I'm in a unique position to talk about Trump and racial animus. So a lot of people don't realize that I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. It's my first time calling.
That's okay.
A lot of people don't realize that Illinois is people think that Illinois is a very blue state. It's cobalt blue. That's what people say, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's actually not the case. So there are actually only 3 counties in Illinois that are blue. One of them is Cook County. And
Chicago, right?
Yeah, Chicago. And the downstate Illinois people, I live in downstate Illinois, are extremely resentful of the fact that Chicago controls Illinois' politics. And so people like you, they don't get to hear. Like talk radio, here it's dominated by Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh, the usual suspects.
Sure.
And that is not what is happening. So the problem is that, and the reason that Trump, I believe, won this election is that no one's talking to each other. And I know this has been done to death.
Well, it's also because, Ron, there's this massive right-wing radio and television infrastructure that simply does not exist on the left. Yeah, I'm with you.
Huge.
It is. Yeah, it is huge. Real quick, Ron, you got 10 seconds.
Okay, a question I'd put out to the listeners that maybe someone could call into is, how do we break that wall down? How do we get people to talk to each other once again so that people who listen to Thom Hartmann can hear Thom Hartmann and people who listen to Sean Hannity?
Ron, I have some thoughts on that. I'll share them with you a little later on. Thank you for the call.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around. And welcome back. Paul in La Mirada, California. Hey, Paul, thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's on your mind today?
Hi, how you doing, Tom? Really love your show.
Thank you.
The caller before was talking about how we get people to talk to each other. I actually wanted to tell you about an event I've been doing for the past year. Actually, it'll be a year in 3 days, called Free Discussion Society. We get together at a coffee shop in Fullerton, California, and I present a topic maybe about a few weeks before I post the event on Facebook with the topic. And we get about like 20 to 30 people to come out and just like have a conversation. It's a moderated discussion format that I kind of created. And we just get together and we talk about some topics. The last topic we did just was last weekend. Was what are you going to do to make the world better in 2018? We talked about Trump's election and what we learned about it and what must be done. Last September, we talked about, the topic was, what does feminism mean to you? We talked about healthcare, about like, do you think we're going to war? A bunch of different things. And
so these are basically kind of salons, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was inspired. Adam Hochschild wrote the book Bury the Chains, and he talked about the old like debate societies they used to have in England in like the 19th century. And maybe about 2 years ago, I was inspired by that to kind of create this format where we can have like a moderated discussion to where people from all kind of different backgrounds can not just talk about things on social media all the time and actually like talk about things in person where it kind of resonates more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is marvelous, Paul. You know, there's other groups too. That yours is called the Free Discussion Society. Did you say?
Yeah, Free Discussion Society. Yeah.
Is I mean, there's like drinking liberally, screening liberally, eating liberally. There's these groups around the country where people get together once a month or once a week, depending on the size of the town and how active the group is at the local bar or their favorite restaurant, or to go watch movies and things. Is Free Discussion Society a national group? Is there a website?
There's no website. It's not a national group. It's just something we do at a local coffee shop in Fullerton. It's like down the street from me.
That's great.
Yeah. And, I think the most people we've had is maybe like 33. They last for about 2 hours, sometimes 2.5 hours. But, I mean, aside from that, made it. Like, everybody that comes usually loves it, and they leave inspired a lot of times. And the next one we're going to have is on February 18th, and this is your invite. If you're in Southern California, you're more than welcome.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
And before I go, I mean, I kind of just wanted to say our mission statement is very short, if you don't mind.
No, go for it. We have 36 seconds, Paul.
Okay, perfect. The mission statement for Free Discussion Society is welcome to the end of apathy. We are here to take an active role in cultivating ideas and developing solutions to harness the power of discussion and critical thinking. We are here to spread the most valuable commodities that we have, knowledge and information.
Wow. You guys should put together a website so that other people can imitate what you're doing.
Yeah.
Here's how we did it.
Pitched it to PBS, NPR. So, yeah, I'm trying to, make it into, a national thing because I think it's needed in this day and age.
Yeah, I agree.
Apathy and cynicism.
Yeah, I know. It sounds like a great idea, and it's the sort of thing that could go viral. If you guys put up a website about it that's, instructive, I mean, it would invite local people in your neighborhood, but that other groups could say, hey, we can do the same thing. I think you would be surprised at how fast something like that could really, really go viral. So if that happens, call back and let us know. We'll promote the website. Okay, Paul?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for watching the program. We'll be right back.
Hi there, I'm Marie with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving donations, volunteering, or spreading the word about Free Speech TV, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to exist. And for that, I want to say thank you. Now you can give to the network powered by the people by donating an unwanted or used vehicle through our Vehicles of Change program. If you have an old car, RV, or even a motorcycle, Free Speech TV can use it to grow and thrive. You can make a bigger difference in supporting Free Speech TV by giving an old car. It's a great way to support the network without having to dig into your bank account. Just call 877-378-8669 and ask for more information about Vehicles of Change. Again, the number to call is 877-378-8669. If it has a VIN, we'll take it in. Thank you.
Thom Hartmann Program, and Jim in Los Angeles. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Professor Hartmann, you're still the smartest man in all media, but I might have my own show soon, so then you'll be the second.
Well, good on you, Jim. So what's on your mind today?
Mainly, there's 100 million people that didn't vote in the last election, and there's 13 million legal Mexican-American citizens not registered to vote, and this is the millennials' world. It's your millennial, it's your century. Get out there. 86% of you did not vote. This is the most important election in history. I know everyone says it every time, but this one, if we don't stop this, man, it's scary, Tom. It's scary. They're talking about using nuclear weapons. My goodness. Jeez. But we can win back the House and the Senate. There are 14, flip to 14 in California. There are 9 Republican congressmen in New York. There's 23. We only need 1 more. Right. And we have to do it in the blue states, because they cheat in the red states. And, and there's the, what's it called, the red flip?
The red shift, which is in those red states where they use voting machines. Somehow the votes don't correspond to the exit polls, which, of course, is what the United Nations uses to identify election fraud. But Republicans don't want to talk about that or look at that or anything else. So.
No, and a scary thing was, Tom, is that the 2000 election was flipped because the Supreme Court said George Bush would suffer irreparable harm. Well, that was because Fox News called him the winner. That was Bret Baier. And that would have been the irreparable harm.
It was actually George W. Bush's cousin on Fox News who called that.
Really?
Who called that he won the election. Yep, absolutely. So anyhow, your point is really, really well taken, and thank you for that call. Jim in Los Angeles. Hey, that's the same Jim. I'm sorry, Jim. Richard in Los Angeles. Hey, Richard, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, thank you.
Sure.
I just read an article where the FBI has started an investigation on whether the Russians funneled money through the NRA for Trump's election.
Yeah, and the big question here, in my mind anyway, I find this fascinating. I'm watching this whole thing, it's just absolutely fascinating. Was it the Russian government trying to get money to the NRA to try to get money to Trump to try to influence the election, or was it Russian organized crime? And to what extent can you can you disentangle the two? I mean, organized crime had a huge influence in the United States for years and years. What's his name? The head of the FBI for years, in the red dress, he was gay. Clyde Tolson was, J. Edgar Hoover. Thank you, Sean. J. Edgar Hoover for years denied the existence of the mafia because they were blackmailing him. They had, every year Trafficante used to invite him and Clyde Tolson down to Hialeah and give them, free racetrack passes and things like that, and then, and bring them boys to their room and apparently videotape them through a one-way mirror or something. I mean, it was totally bizarre. So, it is possible. It's entirely conceivable that organized crime and government end up in bed with each other. But the evidence of Donald Trump having a long-term relationship, and this is, the testimony that came out from the House yesterday of Mr. Steele, the Steele dossier, and what was the guy's name who was the president of the company, Chris, whatever his name is. Anyway, his testimony suggested that for years and years, as they started looking into Trump's past, he was involved with the Italian mafia, and then he started getting involved with the Russian mafia. So, whose money is it? How did it get here? What role did the NRA play? I want to know the answers to these, and America needs to know the answers to these. And by the way, this back door that allowed foreign money to come into the United States and influence elections was opened by the U.S. Supreme Court, and that needs to be fixed too. Back to you, Richard.
Well, Tom, one of the monetary facts was that during the guy from Utah that ran in 2016.
Orrin Hatch?
Oh, no.
Mitt Romney?
The millionaire, Mitt Romney.
Yeah.
The NRA gave $3 million to his campaign.
Right, they gave
And then all of a sudden, for Trump, they gave $30 million.
Right.
10 times the amount.
Yep.
And what I'm worried, what I would like to know, Tom, if any of this can be proven, what will this do for the reputation of the NRA?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I've never put at the top of my list concerns about the reputation of the NRA. I think it's already in the toilet, but not among its members. And to the extent that its members, I don't know, among authoritarian types, there's kind of broad support for the raw kind of capitalism and tough guy persona that Putin is presiding over in Russia. And so I'm not sure that that's going to be a problem for the NRA internally. The problem would be, did they commit a felony? Did they break the law? And I'm looking forward to finding out about that. But Richard, thanks for raising an important issue. Did you wanted to add something? No, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say that Putin is not in favor of letting the Russian people have arms.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure that that's true. Richard, thank you for the call. And welcome back to our Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Devil's Bargain by Joshua Green, the subtitle Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, and the Storming of the Presidency. This is from the afterword, the very last chapter. It's titled Kali Yuga, which in Hinduism is when the earth goes into a phase of destruction. In the shell-shocked aftermath of the election, President Obama, looking shaken, appeared in the White House Rose Garden to deliver public remarks intended to project a sense of calm a sense, really, that the basic stability of our country remained intact. Sun is up, Obama said. I know everybody had a long night. I did as well. Had a chance to talk to President-elect Trump last night about 3:30 in the morning, I think it was, to congratulate him on winning the election. End of quote. The next day, when the two men appeared together in the Oval Office, it felt as if the world had slipped through the looking glass. Trump quickly named Bannon his chief White House strategist. Republicans controlled every branch of government. With Trump's ability to defy every political norm, anything seemed possible. Who could argue otherwise after what had just transpired? And yet, within days of his inauguration, Trump's White House was plunged into chaos and scandal from which it has not recovered and may never. Bannon, the imaginative reconceiver of U.S. politics, hung streams of paper listing Trump's promises from the walls of his West Wing office. His strategy, as always, was to launch furious attacks, this time to, quote, shock the system, end quote, and rapidly reorient the federal government in a more nationalist direction. He called this, with what I took to be intentional irony, a shock and awe approach to asserting Trump's power. But Trump's flurry of activity quickly ran into problems. There was his executive order, sprung a week after his inauguration, banning immigrants from 7 majority Muslim countries, which set off nationwide protests and was blocked by the courts. His firing 2 weeks later of National Security Director Michael Flynn for contacts with the Russians. The collapse of his first major legislative initiative, a bill to repeal Obamacare. His firing of FBI Director James Comey, and the swift descent of the West Wing into a viper's nest of backstabbing and leaks. This quick turn toward a crack-up was hardly unforeseeable or even altogether surprising, but it contrasted sharply with the success of a candidate who had dominated his opponents, shaped news coverage, and shown himself to be all but impervious to the forces that overwhelm other politicians. Bannon, whose wild gambits in the campaign had invariably paid off, seemed to run out of magic tricks when Hillary Clinton was no longer a target. The government wasn't as malleable to Trump and Bannon's aggressions as the Republican Party and the cable news channels had been, and they found themselves consistently thwarted and undermined by the courts, by right-wing hardliners in Congress, by their own inexperience and Trump's errant tweets, and by the bureaucracy they were now overseeing. The crises these failures precipitated in the White House cost Bannon much of his influence and soon threatened Trump's presidency. While it's still early in his term, the possibilities that Trump's most ardent supporters once imagined for his presidency already seem to be mostly foreclosed. I think there are 3 main reasons why Trump's administration has so quickly fallen into disorder and confusion. Number 1, Trump thought being president was about asserting dominance. Just after he'd locked up the GOP nominations, Trump said something to me that crystallized his view of politics and explains, to my mind, much of his subsequent difficulties. Quote, I deal with people that are very extraordinarily talented people, he told me. I deal with Steve Wynn. I deal with Carl Icahn. I deal with killers that blow these politicians away. It's not even the same category. This, he meant politics, this is a category that's like 19 levels lower. You understand what I'm saying? Brilliant killers. Trump was equating politics with business and the presidency with the job of being a big shot CEO, a killer. He filled the upper ranks of his administration with people of a similar mindset. Gary Cohn, Wilbur Ross, Steve Bannon, aggressive, domineering men accustomed to getting their way by dint of their position. None had government experience, nor did many others in the West Wing. So none anticipated the problems this approach to governing would cause. Trump's self-conception as the all-powerful apprentice boss blinded him to a fundamental truth of the modern presidency, that the president needs Congress more than the Congress needs the president. Trump's domineering instinct served him poorly, since most members of Congress are secure in their jobs and accountable mainly to their own constituents. And it backfired disastrously when Trump fired Comey after he refused to submit to a pledge of loyalty to his boss. Number 2, Trump ran against the Republican Party, Wall Street, and Paul Ryan, but then took up their agenda. Populists often struggle to govern, but Trump scarcely attempted to lead the populist revolution that he promised. In May, he told me he would transform the Republican Party into a workers' party. But while he kept voicing populist shibboleths, the legislative agenda he took up was the standard conservative fare pushed by Paul Ryan. During the GOP primary, Trump has shrewdly sensed its weak point Ryan's desire to finance tax cuts for the rich by cutting programs like Social Security and Medicaid harmed the party's white blue-collar base. Trump told me he'd made this point to Ryan directly. He said, quote, "There's no way a Republican is going to beat a Democrat when the Republican is saying we're going to cut your Social Security and the Democrat is saying we're going to keep it and give you more." The book is Devil's Bargain by Joshua Green, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, and the Storm for the Presidency.
Commercial free, and you can listen anytime, any place you want.
Just this amazing story by Ryan Riley over at the Huffington Post today in their politics section. 3 anti-Muslim extremists were arrested ahead of the 2016 election and charged with plotting a terrorist attack that would have killed Somali refugees. Okay, so we're on point with this. And they note at the very, or Ryan Kelly notes at the very end of the article, or toward the end of the article, because there's no federal criminal law specifically outlawing acts of domestic terrorism writ large, and I did not know that. No federal law against domestic terrorism. Federal officials usually hesitate to use the word terrorism in cases involving white non-Muslim defendants who face charges that aren't specifically terrorism related. This case, which involved a charge of conspiracy to use a weapon of mass destruction, was the exception to that rule. But here's the kicker. These 3 guys they were conspiring to use car bombs to kill Somali refugees around the time of the 2016 election. They're on trial. You are entitled, according to the, I believe it's the 6th Amendment, maybe it's the 7th Amendment, whichever it is, you are entitled to a trial before a jury of your peers. And so their lawyer went into court and said, these men are Trump supporters, and so a jury of their peers should be made up mostly of Trump supporters. I kid you not. Domestic terrorists. He pointed out, or they wrote, the lawyer wrote in this petition, he said, while Trump won by 27 percentage points in the Wichita-Hutchinson jury division, that's where they were being tried. The jury pool was from a community that Trump won the election in 2016 by 27 points. But the next county over, the Dodge City area, Trump beat Clinton by 54 points. And so they were saying they wanted to move the trial to the next town over because there would be more Trump supporters in the jury pool. This is a verbatim quote from the attorneys. Stated another way, a prospective juror who lives in a county within the Dodge City jury division is twice as likely to be a Trump voter than the prospective juror who lives in a county within the Wichita-Hutchinson jury division. Now, let me just ask you, if 2 years ago, when President Obama was president, some African-American had killed some white people or conspired to kill some white people, and then when was put on trial had said, wait a minute, I want a jury of Obama supporters rather than simply a jury that's representative of the community, can you imagine what Fox News would have said? Can you imagine what hate radio, right-wing hate radio would have done? This is just astonishing. The judge, by the way, threw out their request and said, no, you're going to be tried before a jury of your peers who 24% of whom are who 50 plus 24% are Trump supporters. Trump won by 24 points. Incredible. Dave in Buffalo, New York. Hey, Dave, what's on your mind?
Thanks, Tom. For the new year, Joyner Lucas, a rap artist, has a rap song out it's called I'm Not Racist. And it has an offering. Before I get to my main topic, One United, this is really a beautiful statement. We were all humans. At the end of the video, it offers it to you this. We were all humans until race disconnected us, religion separated us, politics divided us, and wealth classified us. And I saw that. I was like, wow, that's really awesome. Then that right-wing terrorist, they offered that 1,000-pound bomb at One United. What One United is, the only African-American-owned bank in America. And their feeling is bank black, buy black, support black. There's $1.2 trillion going through the African-American community of the United States in 1 year. And they don't redline. They're not into that. And they said support black, be black, buy black. It's, and it's just also about the working poor and anybody. They're online, and that's the reason that guy tried to set up. And when I heard One United, I was like, wow, that's the African-American-owned bank. That's why that's like that. And
wow.
I wanted to call in and mention that.
Thanks for adding the context, Dave. I appreciate that. That's great.
Yeah, unbelievable. They're really out there, and we gotta put out the numbers.
Yeah. That's striking. Dave, thank you for the call, and thanks for sharing. Thank you for sharing that with us. Jim in Lombard, Illinois. Hey, Jim, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's up?
Hi, Tom. I just got something to say about hunger and homelessness.
Okay.
According to the book Betting on Famine by John Ziegler, there are nearly 1 billion people on this planet suffering from permanent hunger. Several million children die every year from severe acute malnutrition. And according to Joel Berg in his book, America, We Need to Talk, in the year 2014, there were 47.7 million Americans living in poverty and 2.5 million American children who were homeless. Half of them were 6 years old and younger. My question is, why are food, shelter, and health care not rights in this world?
Well, they are in much of this world. Food, shelter, and health care are considered rights in Scandinavian countries, in some of the Northern European countries, in some other countries around the world, in Japan, for example. But we don't consider them a right because we've got a bunch of right-wing billionaires who own the entire Republican Party and some parts of the rest of our political system. And we've got, something short of 100 million Americans who don't bother to show up at the polls and vote. So that would be my answer to that, Jim, and why I think that is the case. Jim, thanks for the call. And Adrian in Plainfield, New Jersey. Hey, Adrian, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how you doing, Tom? Good. I wanted to throw an idea that I had at you, and I call it the pre-primary. Basically, like maybe 4 months before the primary, the progressives, all the progressives who declare, come together and organize behind our revolutions, MoveOn.org, can basically have like a month where they have forums of debates and the debate all the different policies, environmental, et cetera, things that like what Bernie loved having debates. So basically you get your ideas out, and then at the end of that month, they declare whether it's through the members of MoveOn.org. I like how they were able to choose and endorse Bernie, so I trust a system like that. Mm-hmm. And they galvanize and consolidate their support behind one progressive, so that going into the primary, instead of having 4 progressives versus against the one corporate Democrat, they could consolidate all their power behind, all their votes behind one person to try to get them over the primary hurdle.
Right. Being strategic. I think it's brilliant. Being strategic about elections, and we're seeing that more and more. I mean, I don't want to name specific primaries. I have one in Wisconsin in mind, which you could probably figure out, where there's a couple of really good progressives, but there's one who's really caught the imagination of people and in all probability is going to win the primary. And it's an embarrassment of riches, I suppose, when you've got multiple people. But Adrian, excellent point. Yeah. Thank you very much for the call. Rob in Verona, New Jersey. Hey, Rob, what's up?
Hey, Tom, thanks for taking my call. I'd like to thank you for your service to our country. I really enjoy the radio show.
Thank you.
I just want to talk about this new tax reform plan and how it's going to devastate the suburbs around New York City. I'm in New Jersey, Verona, right next to Montclair, and high property taxes and high local taxes, and limiting this to $10,000 for a year is going to be devastating, and nobody's talking about it. And I'm talking about teachers and nurses that are in this town, solidly middle class,
right,
who are losing $5,000 to $10,000 of deductions. I mean, property taxes are high around here. We're in a high property tax and income tax state as well. But what people aren't talking about also is that when you don't itemize, you're not building on the charitable deduction as well. So as you're doing itemized deduction, I'm a financial controller by trade, actually. That's my job. So as you're giving to charity, you're building your itemized deduction. You want to do that as you get on in the year and build up the itemized deductions. And people aren't talking about this. The nonprofits are going to take a really, really big hit on this. And also, they wiped out the moving fees, moving for a job. You can't deduct that anymore. Accounting fees. This is going to affect our local economy here. And like I said, we're not rich around here. We're solidly middle-class working people. And Senator Menendez brought this up at the debates about the tax reform, that I think it was 83% are affected. 83% of people making under $200,000 are going to be affected by this. And this is something that we're all talking about, and some of us prepaid our property taxes to get a benefit because we're not going to get that benefit in the next few years.
Yeah, no, I'm very familiar with that, Rob, and I know that some states are trying to come up with creative ways to deal with it. I'm curious, you live in New Jersey, and it sounds like you're politically astute. Phil Murphy is your new governor, and he is extremely progressive. He's talking like Bernie Sanders. And he's talking about a public bank. We just have 5-10 seconds here, but are you as enthusiastic about Phil Murphy as I am?
We are all talking about Phil Murphy here. We're celebrating Phil Murphy every day, and we're all going to be at the march. There's a march in Morristown, New Jersey, and a march in New York City tomorrow. I hope everybody is there.
There you go.
I hope to see you there. I hope to see everybody there.
Rob, thank you, and thanks for listening to SiriusXM. We'll be right back.
Thanks very much, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's the tail end of Anything Goes Friday. Back with more of your calls right after this. And welcome back. Rick in Weston, West Virginia, watching us on Free Speech TV. Hey, Rick, what's up? Rick? Say that again? Oh, that's interesting. He must be muted or something. I don't know what's going on here. Paul in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
Good afternoon, Tom. I appreciate your time.
Sure.
I'm going to come from somewhere different with you.
Okay.
I was a congressman. I ran in the 2016 election to represent my district, and found that it was really a horrible situation with regards to leadership. Now, if I was going to do it again, this is what my word would be. First of all, I would say, Donald Trump, you were brilliant. Because, I mean, after all, who could have gotten, $2 billion worth of free advertising during the election?
Yeah.
So you got to admit he's brilliant.
Well, he's brilliant at manipulating the media, and the media is more interested in chasing dollars than chasing democracy. I'll give you that.
Okay, and then right after that, I would follow it up with 20 things that would make Donald Trump the greatest president ever.
Okay.
And then you could just go right down the line. I've got very smart friends that I met through the Census Bureau in 2010. You know, IQ is what you would call genius. And so I asked them if you could do it all over, and now what you didn't know then, how would you do things? How would you create jobs? How would you feed people? How would you provide transportation? Their answers, all common sense, mirrored our current life form in no way. And so one of the smarter ones, he right away he told me something, and so I used that when I went and talked at a town hall meeting. And I stood up and I said, Congressman, if I was to come here with an idea to create jobs, you would tell me that it's not the government's job to create jobs. So he says, no, exactly. I said, so, if I came here with an idea to create jobs and the government was keeping me from doing it, you'd say, no way. Exactly. Government shouldn't keep you from keeping jobs. I said, okay, well, let me tell you about a product. There's a product that's used in over 1,500 products in our daily activities. It fulfills an obligation of a daily requirement for our nutrition. It's the only product in the world that if you let it go through its complete growing cycle, the soil has more nutrients at the end of it than it does at the beginning. So it has been known to stimulate brain activity. And I can't remember the last thing I said.
That's okay. You're getting to medical marijuana here, Paul?
No, hemp.
Hemp, yeah. The same thing, or recreational pot. Yeah, the whole cannabis thing. I didn't know that cannabis worked like legumes do. And does it fix nitrogen in the soil?
Yes, hemp is the plant that will have more nutrients in the soil than at the end.
Huh.
And so
I did not know that.
What is this miracle product? And I said, hemp. It's illegal to grow here, and we import it off from China and Canada.
Right. Amazing.
And he said,
yeah.
Oh, well, don't believe you.
Okay. Paul, thank you very much for the call. We'll be back with more of your calls right after this.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news.
Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here
on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here
on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you 24 hours a day,
every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us
raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back to the last 15 minutes here or thereabouts of our Anything Goes Friday show today. Linda in Des Plaines, is it Des Plaines, Illinois? Linda?
Des Plaines.
Des Plaines. Great. So what's up?
Not Des Plaines.
Okay.
Des Plaines. No, I'm just calling you because I have a son who's in office candidate school. I'm not going to tell you where because he'll probably kill me. But he's had to pay for his own meals there.
You're kidding. In
basic training, and right now he's paying for his own meals. They take it out of his pay.
Did they privatize the KP service?
Pardon?
Did they privatize the kitchen, the KP service?
Yes, they did. Oh, yes, they did.
So they're doing this to pay the private for-profit corporation that's now...
I have no idea. All I know is they have to pay for it.
That's obscene.
In basic, and he had to pay for it in officer's candidate school. And then when he graduated basic, they give you a sheet of what you need. And then you run out, you go to Ranger Joe's or whatever, and then you spend $1,400 there so you could become a second lieutenant.
Wow.
And if the Republicans out there think that $700 billion is going to the troops and their families and to the VA vets,
no,
they're out of their mind.
Yeah, no, that...
Because like you said, it's going towards the weapon makers, the weapon sellers, because my father, who fought in World War II, also Korea, also trained troops for Vietnam. Well, guess what? He was 100% German. Bad eye, bad ear, but they took him anyways because he could speak the dialect, different dialects of German, and he came here when he was 10 years old. Well, when he entered the Army, he became a citizen, which Trump and the Republicans have wiped out also.
Right.
You cannot become a citizen through the military anymore. And then after my dad served in World War II, he married my mother, who happened to be Jewish. So, according to Trump laws, if you're Muslim, you can't come here. Well, do you realize how many Muslims become Muslim because they're born there?
Right.
And we actually have Christians who are practicing their faith in bathrooms or surrounded by brick walls.
Because
they cannot publicly or even to their neighbors or even to their own relatives state that they are Christians in these Muslim countries.
Yeah.
And that a few years ago we knew the government had allowed some of the Christians into who were from Syria. And I knew this because we have people from the government.
Well, Syria, Assad, as evil as he is, was protecting Christians in his country. What's his name? Saddam Hussein, who ran Iraq, protected Christians in Iraq. It was the Wahhabists, this infectious religion that Saudi Arabia has been promoting, who basically turned these countries into hellholes for Christians. I get what you're saying, Linda, though. Thank you for the call, and thanks for sharing your experience with us. Jody in Fairfield, Connecticut. Hey, Jody, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Pleasure to speak to you. I really appreciate what you do and that your message is sure and steady all the time. And I wanted to say probably why the marijuana or hemp improves the soil is because it probably has a deep taproot and it pulls all the minerals up.
Oh, that makes
there
sense.
There are weeds that do things like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
trees do
I know that you... Go ahead.
Trees do that, too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I was just wondering, you've had Richard Wolff on before. I think so many of these problems really do come down to money, and maybe we really need to start to talk about capitalism as the root of a lot of this stuff. And I remember the movie that came out in '82, was it Corporation, where they talked about that the corporations pass the test for a psychopath or like that. I just think it's time for people to talk about what is the root of everything. What is the root in, environmental, political, political parties? That it just seems capitalism is at the very root. And I don't have a solution, but I have to say I used to live in Europe, and when I came back home, my family always says to me, if you don't like it here, why don't you go back to Europe? I said, in Europe, I'm a centrist, but here I'm like a radical because everything's so, so right of center, even if you're a quote-unquote liberal. So,
well, I think what you're describing is not just capitalism, but raw, unregulated capitalism, because in Europe they practice capitalism. It's just heavily regulated so that, because, the driving force of capitalism is greed. And if you believe Ronald Reagan and Friends and the old Chicago schoolboys and whatnot, greed is a fundamental good. I don't believe that. But greed as a motivator, or at least some moderate form of greed, hey, let's build something, let's make some money, let's have a good living. If it's moderated with appropriate protections to society and to the customers and consumers and communities in which capitalism is happening, it can be a functional economic system. But we have just taken and this is what Trump is doing now. Do away with 2 regulations for every one new one that's passed. The regulations are consumer protections. They're ways of moderating the damage that capitalism can do. So I'm with you, Jody. I'm not willing to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Forgive the horrible old cliche, but we do need, and this is what FDR did. He regulated capitalism. Jody, thank you for the call, and thank you all so much for being with us today and all this week. It's been a fascinating week. We'll see tonight what happens with the Senate and with the government and the shutdown and everything else. But in the meantime, don't forget democracy. And tomorrow, by the way, is the big march. And it's happening all over the world, all over the country anyway, I believe all over the world. So check it out. And don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. Get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll see you Monday.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com.